When Calder Hayes hired a mail-order bride to fill the emptiness in his Montana ranch, he expected one woman. What stepped off that dust-covered stagecoach was a desperate soul with two starving children and a killer on her trail. In the blistering summer heat, he had one choice: turn them away to certain death or shelter three strangers whose secrets could cost him everything. This is the story of the man who chose love over safety, family over solitude. Stay until the end to see how one decision changed 5 lives forever. And comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The heat was a living thing. It rose off the Montana dirt in shimmering waves, distorting the horizon line where the Rocky Mountains met the sky. Calder Hayes stood in front of his ranch house, one boot propped on the porch step, his hat pulled low to shield his eyes from the merciless sun. Sweat traced a line down his spine, soaking into the fabric of his work shirt. The temperature had to be pushing 100 degrees, and it wasn't even noon yet. July in Montana was unforgiving. Beautiful, yes. The wildflowers still bloomed in defiant splashes of purple and gold across the valley, but brutal. The kind of heat that made men short-tempered and cattle listless. The kind that could kill you if you weren't careful. Calder had been standing there for the better part of an hour, waiting. The stagecoach from Billings was late. Again. He'd ridden into town 3 times in the past 2 weeks, each time told the same thing: delayed, weather, broken wheel, sick horses. The excuses didn't matter. What mattered was that somewhere on that coach was a woman named Evelyn Ward who'd answered his advertisement for a wife. He still wasn't entirely sure why he'd placed that ad. Loneliness, maybe. The ranch was profitable enough: 300 acres of good grazing land, a sturdy herd, a house his grandfather had built with his own hands. But it was empty. Had been empty since his wife Sarah died 4 years ago, leaving him with a daughter who barely spoke to him and a silence that grew heavier with each passing season. Maddie was 16 now, wild and angry and hurt in ways Calder didn't know how to fix. She'd loved her mother with a fierce intensity, and when Sarah succumbed to pneumonia that bitter winter, something in Maddie had closed off. She went through the motions, cooking, cleaning, helping with the horses, but she did it all with a coldness that broke Calder's heart. He thought maybe a woman's presence would help. Someone to soften the hard edges of their life. Someone to fill the spaces Sarah had left behind. So he'd written the ad. Kept it simple. Rancher seeks wife. Hard work, honest living, Montana territory. Must be of good character and willing to build a life in rough country. Evelyn Ward had been the only respondent who seemed genuine. Her letters were careful, educated, with a formality that suggested she came from better circumstances than most women who answered such ads. She'd been vague about her reasons for seeking a husband out west, but Calder hadn't pressed. Everyone had their reasons. Everyone had their ghosts. The sound of hoofbeats and creaking wheels pulled him from his thoughts. Calder straightened, shading his eyes with one hand. A cloud of dust rose from the road, and then the stagecoach emerged from it like a ship from fog. The horses were lathered, their sides heaving. The driver looked exhausted, his face burned red by the sun. The coach rattled to a stop in front of the house. "Hayes?" the driver called down, spitting into the dust. "That's right. Got your package." The man's tone was sour. He climbed down from his perch with a grunt, moving to the coach door. "Though I gotta say, this ain't what I signed up for." Calder's jaw tightened. "Something wrong?" "You'll see." The driver yanked open the door. "All right, folks, end of the line." For a moment, nothing happened. Then a hand appeared, slim, feminine, gripping the doorframe. A woman emerged, stepping carefully down onto the running board. She was younger than Calder expected, late 20s, maybe 30, with dark hair pulled back in a bun that had mostly come undone during the journey. Her dress was plain but well made, though now it was wrinkled and stained with travel dust. She had a face that might have been pretty under different circumstances, but right now it was drawn tight with exhaustion and something else. Fear. But it wasn't the woman who made Calder's breath catch. It was what came after her. A boy climbed out next, maybe 10 or 11 years old. He was thin, too thin, with dark circles under his eyes and a wariness in his face that no child should have. His clothes hung loose on his frame, and he moved with the careful economy of someone who'd learned not to draw attention. Then came a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 5. She had the same dark hair as the woman, but where the boy was wary, the girl was simply absent. Her eyes were huge in her small face, but they didn't focus on anything. She clutched a rag doll against her chest with both hands, and when the woman helped her down from the coach, she didn't make a sound. Calder stared. 3 people. 3. Miss Ward? His voice came out rougher than he intended. The woman turned to face him fully. Up close, he could see the fine bones of her face, the intelligence in her eyes, and the desperation. Mr. Hayes? She dipped her head in a gesture that might have been a curtsy under better circumstances. I apologize for the confusion. I can explain. That's 2 more than we discussed. The words came out flat, factual. I know. Her hands twisted together. I'm so sorry. There wasn't time to write and explain. I had to leave quickly, and they had nowhere else to go, and I couldn't just— Ma'am? The driver interrupted, his patience clearly exhausted. Your trunks. He'd already hauled 2 battered cases from the back of the coach and dropped them in the dust. Without another word, he climbed back onto his perch, snapped the reins, and the stagecoach lurched into motion. Within minutes, it was disappearing back down the road, leaving the 3 travelers standing in a cloud of settling dust. Silence fell over the yard. The boy's hand had moved to rest on a knife at his belt, a weapon that seemed far too large and serious for a child. His eyes never stopped moving, cataloging threats. The little girl just stared at nothing, her doll clutched tight. And the woman, Evelyn Ward, looked at Calder with an expression that was equal parts hope and dread. Mr. Hayes, she began again, I realize this isn't what you agreed to. I realize I've put you in an impossible position. If you want us to leave, I understand, but please— Her voice cracked slightly. Please at least let us rest for a few hours. Let the children have some water and food before we go. It's been 3 days of hard travel, and Lila— She glanced at the little girl. Lila needs— Who's after you? Calder interrupted. Evelyn's face went pale. What? Someone's after you. I can see it in every move you make, the way you keep looking at the road, the way that boy's hand is on his knife. Calder's voice remained steady, though his mind was racing. So I'll ask again. Who's after you? For a long moment, Evelyn said nothing. The sun beat down mercilessly. A hawk cried somewhere overhead. Then she lifted her chin, and Calder saw the core of steel beneath her exhaustion. My brother-in-law, she said quietly. Victor Ward. He's hunting us, and he won't stop until he gets Lila back. Why? Because she's the only witness who can prove he murdered her mother. The words hung in the air like the heat shimmer off the road. Calder looked at the little girl again. 5 years old, silent, traumatized, a witness to murder. Every instinct he had screamed at him to send them away, to protect his daughter, his land, his life from whatever hell these 3 people had brought with them. He'd wanted a simple solution to his loneliness, not a catastrophe. Not a killer on his doorstep, not 2 broken children and a desperate woman. But then he looked at Evelyn's face, the way she stood between the children and him, like a shield despite having no power to protect them. The way the boy's thin shoulders were set in a rigid line, ready to fight even though he had no chance of winning. The way the little girl didn't even seem to know where she was anymore. And he thought of Maddie, who'd lost her mother, who knew what it meant to have your world ripped apart. Inside, he said finally. All of you, before this heat kills you. Evelyn's eyes widened. Mr. Hayes, I don't think you understand. I understand plenty. You can explain the details after you've had water and rest. He picked up both trunks with an ease that made Evelyn blink. Come on, house is cooler. He turned and headed for the porch without looking back, trusting they would follow. Behind him, he heard Evelyn's shaky exhale, the shuffle of small feet in the dust. The ranch house was built for Montana weather, thick walls, small windows, a covered porch on all sides to provide shade. Inside, it was a good 20 degrees cooler than outside, though still warm. The main room served as both kitchen and living space, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall. Doorways led to bedrooms at the back. Calder set the trunks down and moved to the kitchen pump, working the handle until water gushed into a tin cup. He handed it to Evelyn. "Drink slow, you too." He nodded at the boy, filling another cup. Evelyn drank like a woman dying of thirst, then helped Lila drink from the same cup. The little girl's movements were mechanical, obedient but absent. The boy took his cup and drained it in 3 long swallows, his eyes never leaving Calder's face. "What's your name, son?" Calder asked. "Jonah." The boy's voice was rough from disuse. "Jonah Ward." "You any relation to Miss Ward?" "She's my aunt." Jonah's hand stayed near his knife. "Lila's my sister." "And where are your parents?" Something dark flickered across Jonah's face. "Dead. Our ma died 6 months ago. Our pa—" His jaw clenched. "He ain't worth mentioning." "That would be Victor Ward," Calder said quietly. Jonah's eyes flashed. "That man ain't my father. Not anymore. Not after what he did." "Jonah?" Evelyn's voice held a warning. "Not now." "Why not?" Jonah turned to her, anger and grief warring in his young face. "He needs to know what kind of devil is coming for us. He needs to know what Victor's capable of." "I know enough," Calder said, though he suspected he knew very little. "You're all exhausted. There's a bedroom at the back. It's my daughter's, but she's out with the herd. You can rest there." "Your daughter?" Evelyn set down her cup carefully. "Mr. Hayes, I don't want to impose on your family any more than I already have." Little late for that. But Calder's tone wasn't unkind. "Come on, let's get you settled." He led them through the house to Maddie's room. It was sparse but clean, a bed, a dresser, a window that looked out over the valley. Maddie had taken most of her things with her when she'd ridden out at dawn, planning to stay with the herd for a few days. "It's small," Calder said, "but it's cool and private." Evelyn looked at the single bed, then at the 2 children. "We can't take your daughter's room." "You can and you will. She won't be back until tomorrow night at earliest." He paused in the doorway. "Rest. We'll talk when you're ready." He started to leave, but Evelyn's voice stopped him. "Mr. Hayes." She stood very straight, despite the exhaustion that lined her face. "Thank you. I know you have no reason to help us. I know we're not what you bargained for, but thank you for not turning us away." Calder looked at her, really looked at her. Beneath the travel dust and exhaustion, he saw a woman who'd been pushed to her absolute limit and kept going anyway. A woman who'd crossed territories with 2 children, knowing a killer was hunting them. A woman who'd answered a stranger's advertisement for marriage because it was the only door left open. "Get some rest, Miss Ward," he said finally. "We'll figure out the rest later." He closed the door and stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to the soft sounds of Evelyn helping the children remove their shoes, her low voice murmuring comfort. What the hell had he just agreed to? Calder moved back to the main room and sank into a chair at the kitchen table. Through the window, he could see the sun blazing down on his land, the pastures, the barn, the mountains rising in the distance. His land, his life. Simple and hard, and his. And now 3 strangers with a killer on their trail. He should send them away. The smart thing, the safe thing, would be to give them some supplies, point them toward the next town, and let them be someone else's problem. He had Maddie to think about, the ranch, his own life. But even as he thought it, he knew he wouldn't do it. Maybe it was because he'd seen too much death already. Sarah dying slowly, fever burning through her while he held her hand and couldn't do a damn thing to help. His own parents gone to illness and accident. He'd buried enough people. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe it was the look in that little girl's eyes, the way she'd seen something so terrible it had stolen her voice. Maybe it was the boy's thin frame and warrior's stance. Maybe it was Evelyn's desperate courage. Or maybe he was just tired of being alone. The sound of a horse approaching pulled him from his thoughts. Calder moved to the window and felt his stomach tighten. Sheriff Alden Pierce was riding up the drive. Calder stepped out onto the porch, closing the door firmly behind him. Pierce was a good man, honest and fair, but he was also thorough. If he'd come all the way out from town, something was wrong. "Alden," Calder greeted him as the sheriff dismounted. "This is a surprise." Pierce was in his 50s, weathered by decades of frontier justice. He had kind eyes, but a lawman's instincts. He tied his horse to the porch rail and climbed the steps, removing his hat to wipe sweat from his brow. "Calder, sorry to drop in unexpected like this." He glanced at the trunk still sitting near the door. "Your mail-order bride arrive?" So the whole town knew. Of course they did. Nothing stayed secret in Montana territory. "She did," Calder said carefully. "Just an hour ago." "Traveling alone?" There it was. The question that mattered. Calder met Pierce's eyes steadily. "Why do you ask?" The sheriff sighed, pulling a folded paper from his vest pocket. "Because I got a telegram this morning from a U.S. Marshal named Victor Ward. Says his sister-in-law kidnapped his children and fled west. Says he's got legal custody and a warrant for her arrest." Calder's blood ran cold, but his expression didn't change. "That so?" "Says she's dangerous, unstable, that she took the children after his wife died, claimed he was unfit, and ran when the court said otherwise." Pierce unfolded the telegram, reading from it. 2 children, boy about 10, girl about 5. Woman's name is Evelyn Ward. "And you came to check if she's here." "I came because the stage driver reported dropping off 1 woman and 2 children at the Hayes Ranch about 2 hours ago." Pierce's voice was gentle but firm. "I came because I need to know if those children are safe, Calder. If there's a custody order, I have to enforce it. Even if the man requesting it is a murderer." The word hung between them. Pierce's expression tightened. "That's a serious accusation." "It's a serious situation." Calder kept his voice level. "Before you enforce anything, Alden, I'm asking you to hear the full story, not just what some telegram says. The whole truth." "Is she here?" "She's resting. They all are. They've been traveling for days in this heat. I need to speak with her, Calder." "You will. Just give her a few hours. She's not running anywhere. Neither are the children. You have my word." Pierce studied him for a long moment. They'd known each other for 15 years, had ridden together during the range wars, shared whiskey after Sarah's funeral. Trust ran deep between them. "Few hours," Pierce said finally. "Then I need statements. And if there's a custody order, Calder, I have to follow it. You understand that?" "I understand you're a man of the law. I'm just asking you to be a man of justice first." Pierce nodded slowly, settling his hat back on his head. "I'll be back at sundown. Have her ready to talk." He rode away, leaving Calder standing on the porch with dread settling in his gut like lead. Inside the house, he found Evelyn standing in the hallway. She'd heard everything. "He's coming back," she whispered, her face ashen. "He's going to take them." "Not if we can prove Victor's guilty." Calder moved toward her. "In your letters, you said you were a teacher. That means you can read and write, think clearly under pressure. So, here's what I need to know. What evidence do you have?" Evelyn's hands trembled. "Evidence?" "That Victor killed your sister, that he's unfit to have custody, anything that would stand up in a court or convince a sheriff." I have my testimony. Jonah's testimony. Lila saw it happen, but she can't speak. She hasn't spoken since—" Her voice broke. "Victor is a U.S. Marshal. He has authority, connections, legal documents. What do I have? The word of a woman and 2 children against a decorated lawman? Then we need more than words." Calder's mind raced. "Your sister, how did she die officially?" "Accident. Victor reported that she fell down the stairs." Evelyn's voice turned bitter. "But she had bruises, Calder. Old ones and new ones. I'd seen them before, tried to get her to leave, but she was afraid. And then one night, Victor came home drunk and angry, and Lila saw him. Saw him push Rebecca. Saw her fall. Anyone else see these bruises? A doctor?" Something flickered in Evelyn's eyes. "Yes, Dr. Rowan Mills. He was our family doctor in Philadelphia. He documented Rebecca's injuries several times over the years, tried to convince her to press charges, but Victor was too powerful, too connected. And where's Dr. Mills now?" "He left Philadelphia 6 months ago. I heard he moved somewhere out west, but I don't know where." Calder felt a spark of hope. If we could find him, if he still has those records, that would be proof. "But how? He could be anywhere from California to Colorado. We don't have time to—" "3 days," Calder interrupted. That's how long it'll take for Victor Ward to get here if he's already on his way. 3 days to find a doctor, get documentation, and build a case. Think, Evelyn. Did Mills ever mention where he was going? Any town? Any territory? Evelyn closed her eyes, clearly trying to remember. He said something about Montana, about wanting to practice in a place that needed doctors, that wasn't so crowded. He mentioned... Her eyes snapped open. Silver Bow. He mentioned Silver Bow specifically, said a friend had written him about opportunities there. Silver Bow. Calder knew it. A mining town about 100 miles north. 2 days hard ride there and back. It was possible. Barely. But even if you find him, even if he still has the records, will it matter? Evelyn's voice was hollow with despair. Victor has a custody order. He has the law on his side. Then we prove he shouldn't. Calder moved to the cabinet where he kept his guns, checking his rifle. I'll ride to Silver Bow tonight, track down Dr. Mills. In the meantime, you stay here with the children. Don't go outside unless you have to. If anyone comes asking, you're putting yourself in danger for us. Evelyn stared at him. Why? You don't know us. You owe us nothing. This isn't your fight. Calder paused, rifle in hand, and turned to face her. Maybe it is, he said quietly. Maybe I'm tired of standing by while bad men win because good people are too afraid to act. Maybe I look at those kids and see my own daughter, and I can't stomach the thought of letting them go to someone who'll hurt them. He met her eyes. Or maybe I just believe you, Miss Ward. Maybe that's enough. Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. If you do this, if you help us, Victor will come after you too. He won't forgive it. He won't forget. Then he can get in line, Calder said. I've made enemies before. A small sound from the doorway made them both turn. Jonas stood there, still gripping his knife, his young face set in hard lines. I'm coming with you, the boy said. No, you're not. I can ride. I can shoot. And I ain't sitting here while another person risks their neck for us. Jonah's voice shook slightly, but his stance was firm. My ma died because we couldn't protect her. I won't let that happen to Aunt Evelyn or Lila. I won't. Calder saw himself in that boy, the rage, the helplessness, the desperate need to do something. He'd felt all of it when Sarah died. You'll protect them better by staying here, Calder said, not unkindly. Your aunt and sister need you more than I do. Can you do that? Can you be the man of the house while I'm gone? Jonah's jaw worked, emotions warring across his face. Finally, he nodded stiffly. Good man. Calder turned back to Evelyn. When Sheriff Pierce comes back, tell him the truth, all of it. He's a fair man. He'll listen. Buy me 3 days. That's all I need. 3 days, Evelyn repeated, as if trying to make herself believe it was possible. Outside, the sun was beginning its descent toward the mountains, but the heat remained brutal. Calder gathered supplies quickly, dried meat, hardtack, water, ammunition. He saddled his best horse, a rangy gelding named Smoke, who could cover ground fast and had stamina to spare. As he worked, Evelyn watched from the porch. The evening light softened her features, made her look younger, vulnerable. But her spine was straight, her chin lifted. Mr. Hayes, she called as he finished tightening the cinch. When I answered your advertisement, I thought I was coming to be a wife, to keep house and bear children and live a quiet life. I never imagined that you'd bring a war to my doorstep, Calder finished, swinging into the saddle. Neither did I, Miss Ward, but wars find us whether we want them or not. The only choice is how we fight them. He nudged Smoke into a trot, then a canter, heading north toward Silver Bow and whatever hope it might hold. Behind him, the Hayes Ranch grew smaller. His home, now sheltering 3 strangers whose fate had become tangled with his own. The sun beat down mercilessly as he rode, heat waves shimmering off the earth. But Calder barely noticed. His mind was racing ahead, planning, calculating odds. 3 days to find a doctor, 3 days to get proof, 3 days to stop a killer who wore a badge. It should have been impossible. But as the mountains rose before him, stark and beautiful in the harsh light, Calder felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. For 4 years he'd been drifting, going through motions, surviving but not living. Now suddenly he had a reason to fight, not just for strangers but for something larger, for justice, for the kind of world he wanted his daughter to inherit. He pushed Smoke harder, and the horse responded, hooves pounding against the dry earth as they raced towards Silver Bow. Behind him, the sun sank lower, painting the sky in shades of fire and blood. Back at the ranch, Evelyn stood on the porch until Calder disappeared from view. Then she turned and went inside, where Jonah waited with his knife and Lila sat silent with her doll. "He's really going to help us?" Jonah asked, disbelief and hope mixing in his voice. "He's going to try," Evelyn said quietly. She knelt before Lila, smoothing the little girl's hair gently. "We're going to be okay, sweet girl. I promise. We're going to be okay." Lila didn't respond, didn't even blink, but her small hand reached out and gripped Evelyn's fingers, holding on tight. It was the first time she'd reached for anything since the night her mother died. The first night passed in uneasy silence. Evelyn had expected sleep to be impossible, but exhaustion claimed her the moment she lay down beside the children. She woke once in the darkness to find Jonah sitting upright against the wall, knife across his lap, keeping watch. She tried to convince him to rest, but he'd just shaken his head, eyes fixed on the door. So she'd let him be, understanding that some wounds ran too deep for comfort. When dawn broke, painting the Montana sky in shades of coral and gold, the heat was already building. Evelyn rose quietly, leaving the children sleeping, and ventured into the main room. The house was still, but she could hear sounds from outside. Animals stirring, the distant lowing of cattle. She found water in the kitchen pump and splashed her face, trying to orient herself to this strange new reality. 24 hours ago, she'd been on a stagecoach, terrified and desperate. Now she was in the home of a man she barely knew, who'd ridden off into danger on her behalf. The front door opened, making her jump. A girl stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the morning light. She was tall and lean, with sun-bleached brown hair pulled back in a practical braid. Her clothes were dusty from riding, worn trousers, a man's shirt, boots caked with dried mud. She carried saddlebags over one shoulder and had a rifle slung across her back. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then the girl's eyes narrowed. "Who the hell are you?" Evelyn straightened, keeping her voice level. "My name is Evelyn Ward. You must be Maddie." "Must be." Maddie dropped her saddlebags with a thud that seemed deliberately loud. "And you must be the mail-order bride my father hired without bothering to tell me about." The hostility in her voice was sharp enough to cut. Evelyn had expected resentment. Of course the girl would feel displaced, but the raw anger caught her off guard. "I'm sorry," Evelyn said carefully. "I know my arrival must be a shock." "Shock?" Maddie laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Lady, I come home after 3 days with the herd to find a stranger in my house, wearing my mother's apron, and you think that's just a shock?" Evelyn looked down. She'd found the apron hanging by the stove and put it on without thinking. Now she untied it quickly, folding it with shaking hands. "You're right. I shouldn't have what? Come here? Taken advantage of a lonely man? Moved into a dead woman's home like you have any right to it?" Maddie's voice rose with each word. "Where's my father?" "He rode to Silver Bow." "Silver Bow? That's 2 days' ride. Why the hell would he—" Maddie stopped, her eyes moving past Evelyn to the hallway where Jonah had appeared, knife in hand, his face set in defensive lines. "And who is that?" "My nephew," Evelyn said quietly. "Jonah. There's also my niece, Lila. She's 5. Maddie stared at her. "You brought children." "I had no choice. Everyone has choices." Maddie's tone was withering. She crossed the room, her boots loud on the wooden floor, and began gathering supplies from the kitchen: bread, cheese, dried meat. "My father advertised for a wife. One woman, not a whole damn family. I know what he advertised for, but circumstances—" "I don't care about your circumstances." Maddie shoved the food into a sack with sharp, angry movements. "I don't care about you or your nephew or your niece. This is my home, mine and my father's, and I want you gone." The words hit like physical blows, but Evelyn forced herself to stay calm. She recognized this anger, had seen it in her students back in Philadelphia when they were hurting. Maddie wasn't angry at Evelyn specifically. She was angry at the world for taking her mother, for changing everything, for forcing her to confront the fact that life moved forward whether you were ready or not. "I understand," Evelyn said softly. "I understand you don't want us here, and if your father decides to send us away when he returns, we'll go. But right now we have nowhere else to be. So I'm asking you for just a few days to let us stay." "Asking me?" Maddie whirled around. "This isn't my decision to make, apparently. My father already made it without consulting me, just like he made the decision to advertise for a wife without asking if I wanted a new mother, just like he makes every decision about my life without caring what I think." Tears shone in her eyes now, though her jaw was clenched tight against them. "I don't want to replace your mother," Evelyn said gently. "No one could." "You're damn right about that." Maddie grabbed her saddlebags. "I'm going back out to the herd. When my father gets back, you tell him I don't want to meet his new family. Tell him I'm fine on my own." She stormed toward the door, but Jonah stepped into her path. "Move," Maddie growled. "You're angry at the wrong person," Jonah said, his young voice steady despite the tension radiating off the older girl. "Your pa didn't ask for us to show up. We're the ones who complicated his life. But he chose to help anyway. Maybe instead of being mad at him, you could try being grateful you got a father who gives a damn." Maddie's hand moved fast, faster than Evelyn could track, and suddenly Jonah was shoved back against the wall, Maddie's forearm pressed across his throat. "Don't you dare," she hissed, her face inches from his. "Don't you dare tell me how to feel about my father. You don't know anything about us, about what we've been through." "I know what it's like to lose a mother." Jonah's voice was strained but defiant. "I know what it's like to watch someone you love die while you stand there helpless. So yeah, I do know. And I also know that pushing away the people trying to help you is a good way to end up alone." For a long moment, they stayed frozen, Maddie pressing Jonah against the wall, Jonah refusing to break eye contact. Then Maddie released him abruptly and stepped back, her chest heaving. "3 days," she said, not looking at Evelyn. "You get 3 days. After that, I want you gone." She left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Evelyn released a breath she hadn't known she was holding. "Are you all right?" Jonah rubbed his throat, nodding. "She's scared." "Scared?" "Yeah. Under all that anger, she's terrified. Terrified of losing her father the way she lost her mother. Terrified that if she lets herself care about anyone new, they'll leave too." He looked at Evelyn with eyes that seemed far too old for his age. "I recognize it because I feel the same way." Before Evelyn could respond, a small voice came from the hallway. "Evie?" They both turned. Lila stood in her nightdress, clutching her doll, her huge eyes full of confusion and fear. "I'm here, sweetheart." Evelyn moved to her quickly, kneeling down. "Did the loud voices scare you?" Lila nodded, but didn't speak. She never spoke. "It's okay. Everything's okay now. Are you hungry?" Another nod. Evelyn led her to the table and began preparing a simple breakfast, bread and butter, some preserved fruit she found in the pantry. As she worked, she tried not to think about Maddie's words, about the 3-day deadline, about the fact that Calder might return empty-handed and they'd be right back where they started. Jonah joined them at the table, and they ate in silence. The morning heat was already intensifying, turning the house into an oven despite the thick walls. Evelyn could feel sweat gathering at her temples, soaking into the collar of her dress. "What do we do now?" Jonah asked finally. "We wait," Evelyn said. "Your Uncle Calder is trying to help us. We have to trust him." "And if the sheriff comes back before Calder does?" It was the question Evelyn had been trying not to ask herself. She met Jonah's eyes, so serious, so afraid despite his attempts to seem brave. "Then I tell him the truth," she said quietly. "And I pray he's the kind of man who values justice over law." The day crawled forward with agonizing slowness. The heat made every movement feel like wading through molasses. Evelyn tried to keep busy, washing clothes, tidying the house, anything to keep her mind occupied. But it was impossible not to glance at the windows every few minutes, watching the road for approaching riders. Lila sat in the corner with her doll, humming tunelessly. It was the only sound she ever made. That wordless humming, like a ghost trying to remember a song. Jonah kept watch at the window, his knife always within reach. Around midday, Evelyn heard hoofbeats. Her heart seized in her chest. "Someone's coming," Jonah reported, his hand moving to his weapon. Evelyn moved to the window. A single rider approached. Sheriff Pierce, just as he'd promised. Alone, at least. That was something. "Stay inside with Lila," Evelyn told Jonah. "Let me handle this." She stepped out onto the porch, squinting against the brutal sun. The sheriff dismounted, moving with the careful deliberation of a man who'd rather be anywhere else. "Miss Ward," he greeted her, removing his hat. "I said I'd be back." "You did." Evelyn's throat felt dry. "Would you like water, Sheriff? It's hot." "It is that." Pierce climbed the porch steps and accepted the cup she offered from the pump. He drank deeply, then set it down with a sigh. "I need to speak with you about the children, ma'am, and I need to do it officially." "I understand." "Do you? Because what I need to tell you isn't easy to hear." Pierce pulled out the telegram again. "Victor Ward has legal custody of those children, Miss Ward, granted by a judge in Philadelphia after his wife's death. The court determined he was fit to parent, and you had no legal right to take them." The court didn't know the truth. "And what truth is that?" Evelyn took a breath, steadying herself. This was it. The moment to convince him or lose everything. "The truth is that Victor Ward murdered my sister," she said clearly. "He beat her for years. I saw the bruises. I begged her to leave him, but she was afraid of what he'd do, afraid he'd take the children. And then 6 months ago, he came home drunk and pushed her down the stairs. His own daughter watched it happen." Pierce's expression didn't change. "That's a serious accusation, ma'am." "It's the truth." "Can you prove it?" "Not yet. But Mr. Hayes is searching for a doctor who documented my sister's injuries. If he can find him, if he can bring back medical records, that would be proof." "And if he can't?" Evelyn's hands trembled. "Then I'm asking you to believe me anyway. I'm asking you to look at those children and see what I see. 2 kids who've already lost their mother. Don't send them back to the man who killed her." Pierce was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. When he spoke again, his voice was gentler. "I've been a lawman for 23 years, Miss Ward. I've learned to spot liars pretty well. And I don't think you're lying, but the law doesn't work on intuition. It works on evidence. Without proof, I have to honor that custody order. How much time do I have?" "Victor Ward sent that telegram yesterday. If he caught a train east to Chicago, then another west, he could be in Billings by tomorrow night, here the day after." Pierce replaced his hat. 2 days, maybe 3 if we're lucky. After that, I have no choice." 3 days, Evelyn repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Hayes said he needed 3 days. Then you better pray he finds what he's looking for." Pierce moved toward his horse, then paused. "Miss Ward, if what you're saying is true, if Victor Ward really did kill his wife, then he's a dangerous man. You need to be prepared for that. Prepared for what he might do when he gets here." "I know what he's capable of, Sheriff. That's why I ran." Pierce nodded grimly and mounted his horse. "I'll stall as long as I can, but 3 days is all I can give you." He rode away, leaving Evelyn standing alone on the porch, the sun beating down mercilessly. Inside, Jonah waited with wild eyes. What did he say? "We have 3 days, maybe less." Evelyn sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. "After that, if your Uncle Calder doesn't return with proof, the sheriff has to enforce the custody order." "Then we run again." Jonah's voice was hard. "We take Lila and we run." "Where?" "Victor will find us, Jonah. He always finds us. He's a U.S. Marshal. He has resources, connections, authority. We can't keep running forever." "Then what do we do?" The desperation in Jonah's voice broke her heart. "What do we do, Aunt Evelyn?" "We trust Mr. Hayes," she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "And we prepare." "Prepare for what?" "For whatever comes." That evening, as the sun finally began its descent and the temperature dropped from unbearable to merely oppressive, Evelyn heard the front door open again. She tensed, but it was only Maddie returning from wherever she'd spent the day. The girl looked exhausted, her face sunburned, her clothes soaked with sweat. She moved through the main room without speaking, heading for her bedroom, then stopped when she saw Evelyn and the children sitting at the table for dinner. "That's my room," Maddie said flatly. "I know. We can sleep in the barn if
It's fine, Maddie cut her off. Keep it. I'll take my father's room. She grabbed some bread and cheese and disappeared into Calder's bedroom, closing the door firmly.
Evelyn looked at Jonah, who shrugged. Still scared, he said quietly. The next day passed in similar fashion, heat and tension and waiting. Maddie avoided them, though Evelyn caught her watching Lila once or twice with an expression that might have been curiosity beneath the resentment. Jonah spent hours outside despite the heat, practicing with his knife, doing drills that looked military in their precision. When Evelyn asked where he'd learned such things, he'd just said, "Victor taught me," before he became a monster. Lila hummed her wordless songs and clung to Evelyn's skirts, flinching at every loud sound. And Evelyn counted the hours, watching the road, praying for a rider who didn't come. On the second night, she woke to find Maddie sitting on the porch in the darkness. The girl had her rifle across her lap, staring out at the moonlit valley. Evelyn stepped outside quietly. "Couldn't sleep?" "Someone needs to keep watch," Maddie said, without looking at her. "My father's gone. That leaves me." "Jonah's been watching too." "That kid?" Maddie's tone was scornful. "He's 10 years old. He's 11. And he's killed a man." That got Maddie's attention. Her head whipped around. "What?" Evelyn sat down on the porch steps, far enough away to not crowd the girl, but close enough to talk. "When we were fleeing Philadelphia. Victor sent men after us, bounty hunters, I think. They caught up to us in Kansas. One of them tried to take Lila, and Jonah—" She closed her eyes. "He stabbed him. Right through the ribs. The man died on the spot." Maddie was silent for a long moment. "And the kid's okay with that?" "No, he has nightmares. I hear him crying sometimes when he thinks I'm asleep, but he did what he had to do to protect his sister." Evelyn looked at Maddie directly. "The same way you'd do anything to protect your father." "That's different." "Is it? You're both children forced to become warriors because the adults in your life couldn't keep you safe." "I'm not a child," Maddie snapped. "I'm 16. "Exactly. You should be worrying about dances and boys and what dress to wear to church. Instead, you're sitting here with a rifle, keeping watch against threats you can't even see yet." Evelyn's voice softened. "I'm sorry, Maddie. I'm sorry my presence here has forced you into this position. I'm sorry your father felt he needed to find a wife. I'm sorry your mother died and left you alone." "Don't." Maddie's voice cracked. "Don't talk about my mother." "Why not? She was your mother. You're allowed to grieve her. You're allowed to be angry that she's gone." "I'm not angry. Maddie stopped, her jaw clenching. "It doesn't matter. It matters to your father. It matters that you're hurting and he doesn't know how to help you." "He doesn't need to help me. I'm fine." "You're not fine. Neither is he." "Neither am I, for that matter." Evelyn leaned back against the porch post. "We're all just broken people trying to survive, trying to protect the ones we love. And sometimes that means accepting help from strangers." Maddie was quiet for so long that Evelyn thought the conversation was over. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, the girl said, "My mother died 4 winters ago. Pneumonia. It came on fast. One day she was coughing. 3 days later she was burning with fever. And by the end of the week—" She swallowed hard. "She died at night. I was holding her hand. My father was on the other side of the bed. And right at the end, she looked at me and said, 'Take care of your papa,' like she knew he'd fall apart without her." "And have you taken care of him?" "I've tried, but he's so empty. Like half of him died with her. He goes through the motions, running the ranch, feeding the animals, fixing what needs fixing. But there's no joy in it anymore. No life." Maddie's hands tightened on the rifle. "And then he placed that advertisement, and I knew he was trying to replace her, trying to fill the hole she left behind with someone new." "He's not trying to replace her," Evelyn said gently. "You can't replace someone you love, but you can learn to live again. That's what he's trying to do. Live, not just survive." "And what about you?" Maddie turned to look at her. "Why did you answer his ad? What are you running from?" "The same thing you are. Grief and fear and loneliness. My sister was my best friend, Maddie. When she died, when she was murdered, a part of me died too. And taking Jonah and Lila wasn't just about saving them. It was about saving myself, about having a purpose beyond just existing. They sat in silence for a while, the night air finally cooling after the brutal heat of the day. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. "I don't hate you," Maddie said finally. "I want to. It would be easier if I did, but I don't. I don't hate you either. Even though I've been awful to you, you've been honest. That's not the same as awful." Evelyn stood, brushing dust from her dress. "Get some sleep, Maddie. I'll keep watch for a while." "You don't know how to use a rifle? Then teach me." Maddie looked at her for a long moment, then stood and handed over the weapon. "Hold it like this. Finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot. Sight down the barrel. And if someone comes that you don't recognize, wake me immediately." "I will." Maddie went inside, leaving Evelyn alone with the rifle in the darkness and the weight of responsibility. She'd never fired a gun in her life, but she'd do whatever it took to protect these children, even the one who resented her presence. The third day dawned hot and clear. Calder had been gone 2 full days now. If he'd made good time to Silverbow, found Dr. Mills immediately, and ridden straight back, he might arrive today. Might. Evelyn tried not to calculate the odds, tried not to think about what would happen if Victor arrived first. Around noon, Jonah came running from his lookout post near the road. "Riders, 3 of them!" Evelyn's heart plummeted. "Is it Calder?" "No, I don't recognize any of them." Maddie appeared from the barn, rifle in hand. Her face was grim. "Get inside, all of you. Now!" They moved quickly, Evelyn gathering Lila while Jonah grabbed his knife. Inside the house, Maddie positioned herself at the window, rifle ready. "Who are they?" Evelyn asked, her voice tight with fear. "Don't know yet, but 3 armed men riding up to a ranch where they know the owner's away? That's never good." Maddie's finger rested near the trigger. "Stay behind me." The riders came closer, and Evelyn could see them more clearly now. 3 men, rough-looking, with the bearing of people who lived hard and violent lives. The one in front had a scar across his cheek and a badge pinned to his vest. A badge. "Oh, God," Evelyn breathed. "Oh, God, no." "What?" Maddie glanced back at her. "That's not Victor, but those are his men. He must have sent them ahead." The riders stopped in front of the house. The scarred man dismounted, his hand resting casually on his pistol. "Evelyn Ward," he called out. "We know you're in there. Come on out. We just want to talk." Maddie's jaw clenched. "That's a lie." "I know." Evelyn's mind raced. "They won't leave without us. Without the children." "Then they're not leaving." Maddie raised her voice, calling through the window. "This is private property. You've got no business here." The scarred man laughed. "That's so. Well, little girl, I've got a legal warrant for the arrest of Evelyn Ward and the return of 2 minor children to their legal guardian. That gives me plenty of business." "Where's your proof? Show me the warrant." "I don't need to show you anything, sweetheart. Now, you can make this easy, or you can make it hard. Either way, we're taking those kids." Maddie's hands tightened on the rifle. "Like hell you are." One of the other men moved his horse forward, reaching for his gun. Maddie's rifle cracked, and dust exploded at the horse's feet. The animal reared, nearly throwing its rider. "Next one goes through flesh," Maddie shouted. "Get off our land!" The scarred man's expression darkened. "You just made a big mistake, girl." "No," a new voice said from behind them. "You did." Everyone turned. Sheriff Pierce sat on his horse at the edge of the property, his own rifle aimed at the 3 men. Behind him were 2 deputies, equally armed. "Sheriff," the scarred man said, his tone suddenly conciliatory. "Good to see you. These folks are harboring fugitives. We're just here to... You're here to start trouble is what you're doing." Pierce nudged his horse forward. "I'm the law in this county, Mr. Briggs. Deputy Briggs, working under U.S. Marshal Victor Ward." "Is that so? Then you know better than to show up at someone's property with guns drawn and threats made." Pierce's voice was steel. "You want to serve a warrant in my jurisdiction? You go through me first. That's how it works." "We tried going through you," Briggs shot back. "You've been stalling. The marshal won't be happy about that." "The marshal can take his happiness and shove it somewhere uncomfortable. I don't answer to him. I answer to the people of this county and to justice. Pierce gestured with his rifle. Now, you've got two choices. You can ride back to town nice and peaceful, wait for Marshal Ward to arrive, and we'll handle this legal and proper. Or you can try something stupid, and I'll have you in cells before sundown for trespassing, threatening, and discharge of a firearm within county limits. The three men exchanged glances. They were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Briggs smiled, but there was no warmth in it. We'll be in town, Sheriff, waiting, but this ain't over. Never thought it was. The three riders turned and headed back down the road, dust rising in their wake. Pierce waited until they were out of sight before dismounting and approaching the porch. Everyone all right in there? Maddie lowered her rifle, her hand shaking slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. Yes, sir. Good shooting, Miss Hayes. Your daddy teach you that? Yes, sir. Pierce looked at Evelyn, who'd emerged onto the porch with Lila clinging to her skirts and Jonah behind her. Miss Ward, we need to talk. I know. Evelyn's voice was steady despite the terror still coursing through her. Sheriff, I appreciate you coming when you did, but nothing. Those men weren't here by accident. Victor Ward is close. Maybe a day away, maybe less. Pierce's expression was grave. And when he gets here, I won't be able to stop him. Not without proof. Where's Calder? Silver Bow. Looking for a doctor who can testify against Victor. Has he sent word? No, we haven't heard anything. Pierce cursed under his breath. Then we're running out of time. Victor will be here tomorrow, Miss Ward. Tomorrow. And unless Calder rides back with ironclad evidence, I'll have no choice but to hand those children over. You can't, Jonah burst out. You can't give us back to him. He'll kill us. Son, I don't want to, but the law protects men like him. Jonah's voice cracked with emotion. The law let him beat my mother for years. The law gave him custody even though Lila watched him murder her. The law doesn't care about us. It only cares about him because he's got a badge. Pierce looked at the boy, really looked at him, and Evelyn saw something shift in the sheriff's face. Recognition, maybe. Or shame. You're right, Pierce said quietly. The law fails people every day. Good people, innocent people. And that's why good men have to work twice as hard to make it mean something. To make it protect the people it should. He met Evelyn's eyes. I'll give you until sundown tomorrow. That's all I can promise. If Calder's not back by then with evidence, I have to do my job. You understand? I understand. Evelyn's throat was tight. Thank you, Sheriff, for everything. Pierce nodded and mounted his horse. As he and his deputies rode away, Maddie turned to Evelyn. What happens if my father doesn't make it back in time? Evelyn looked down at Lila, who was humming that wordless song again, oblivious to the danger closing in around them. At Jonah, who stood rigid with fear and helpless rage. At Maddie, who'd put aside her resentment to defend them. Then we fight, Evelyn said simply. Whatever it takes. We fight. That night, they prepared for war. Maddie showed Jonah how to barricade the doors, how to create sight lines from the windows, where to position themselves for maximum cover. She taught Evelyn the basics of loading and firing the spare rifle, though they both knew it would take more than one lesson to make her an effective shot. Lila watched with wide, silent eyes as they moved furniture and checked ammunition supplies. Will there be shooting? Jonah asked as they worked. I don't know, Maddie admitted. Depends on whether Victor tries to take you by force. He will. That's who he is. Jonah's jaw was set hard. He doesn't take no for an answer. As darkness fell and the temperature finally dropped to something bearable, they sat together in the main room. No one felt like sleeping. Tomorrow could bring salvation or destruction, and there was no way to know which. Tell me about your sister, Maddie said suddenly to Evelyn. Your sister Rebecca, what was she like? Evelyn was surprised by the question, but grateful for something to focus on besides fear. She was kind, gentle, she loved music, used to sing all the time when we were growing up. She had a voice like sunshine. A sad smile touched her lips. When she met Victor, he seemed charming, attentive. We all thought he'd make her happy. By the time we realized what he really was, it was too late. She was already trapped. Why didn't she leave? Maddie asked. She tried, once. Victor found her, brought her back, and
Evelyn glanced at the children, choosing her words carefully. He made sure she understood the consequences of trying again. He broke her arm, Jonah said flatly. Snapped it like a twig, told everyone she fell, made Ma tell everyone she fell. And she did, because she was afraid he'd do worse next time, afraid he'd hurt Lila or me. The room fell silent. My mother tried to leave once too, Maddie said quietly. When I was little, my real father, before Calder adopted me, he was a drunk, mean when he drank. One night he hit her, and she packed a bag and took me to her sister's house. But then he came apologizing, crying, promising to change, and she believed him. Maddie's hands clenched in her lap. He died in a bar fight 6 months later, and then my mother met Calder, and everything got better. He saved us. That's what your father's trying to do now, Evelyn said gently. Save us. I know. Maddie looked at her with eyes that suddenly seemed much older than 16. I know. That's why I've been so angry, because I'm afraid he won't come back. Afraid something will happen to him, and I'll lose another parent. It's not you I'm mad at. It's the situation. It's the unfairness of it all. I understand, Evelyn said. Believe me, I understand. They sat together in the lamplight, 4 people bound by fear and hope, and the desperate need to believe that good men still existed, that justice could still prevail, that tomorrow wouldn't bring the end of everything. Outside, the Montana night was vast and star-filled and beautiful. And somewhere in that darkness, a killer was riding closer. Dawn came too quickly, painting the sky in shades of amber and blood. Evelyn hadn't slept at all. None of them had. They'd taken turns at the windows through the long night, watching the road, listening for the sound of approaching horses. But the darkness had remained empty, offering neither salvation nor threat. Now, with the sun climbing over the mountains and the heat already building, Evelyn felt the weight of the deadline pressing down on her chest like a stone. Sundown. That's what Sheriff Pierce had said. Sundown was when their time ran out. She moved through the house mechanically, preparing breakfast that no one would eat. Her hands trembled as she worked the pump, filled the kettle, sliced bread. Behind her, Jonah sat at the table cleaning his knife for the 3rd time that morning. Maddie stood at the window, motionless as a statue, rifle cradled in her arms. Lila was the only one who seemed unaware of the tension. She sat in the corners with her doll, humming that wordless melody that had become the soundtrack to their fear. Maybe your father found the doctor, Evelyn said, trying to inject hope into her voice. Maybe he's riding back right now with all the evidence we need. Maybe, Maddie replied, but her tone suggested she didn't believe it. Or maybe Victor got to Silverbow first. Maybe my father's lying in a ditch somewhere with a bullet in his back. Don't say that. Why not? It's possible. Victor's a U.S. Marshal with connections everywhere. You think he doesn't have people watching the roads? People who'd report if someone was asking questions about him? Maddie's knuckles were white on the rifle. My father rode into danger because of us, because of you. If something happens to him, it'll be because he chose to help, Jonah interrupted, his voice hard. Nobody forced him. He could have turned us away, but he didn't. So don't you dare blame Aunt Evelyn for his choices. Maddie turned to glare at him, but before she could respond, the sound of hoofbeats froze them all. Multiple horses. Coming fast. Evelyn's heart stopped. She moved to the window beside Maddie, peering out at the road. A group of riders approached through the shimmering heat. 6 men, maybe 7, moving with purpose. Is it Victor? Evelyn's voice came out as barely a whisper. Maddie squinted against the glare. Can't tell yet, but that's too many for a friendly visit. Get away from the windows, Jonah commanded, suddenly sounding much older than his 11 years. Both of you, if they start shooting... They won't shoot, a voice said from the doorway. They all spun around. Sheriff Pierce stood there, hat in hand, his face grim. Behind him, Evelyn could see his deputies taking up positions around the property. Sheriff, Evelyn breathed. What's happening? Victor Ward arrived in town an hour ago, Pierce said heavily. He's at the courthouse right now, filing formal charges. Kidnapping, custodial interference. He's got lawyers, documentation, the full weight of federal authority behind him. He paused,
his jaw clenching. And he's demanding immediate custody of the children. The words hit like physical blows. Evelyn felt her legs weaken, had to grip the back of a chair to stay upright.
"No," she whispered. "Please, no. I'm sorry, Miss Ward. I stalled as long as I could, but he's forcing the issue. The judge has ordered a hearing for noon today. You need to be there, all of you." "A hearing?" Maddie's voice was sharp. "What kind of hearing?" "An emergency custody hearing. Victor's claiming the children are in immediate danger. Says you've brainwashed them, Miss Ward. Says you're mentally unstable and a threat." Pierce looked genuinely pained. "Without evidence to counter his claims, the judge will have no choice but to return the children to their legal guardian." "Then I won't go," Evelyn said, her voice growing stronger with desperate determination. "I won't take them to him. You'll have to drag us there." "Please don't make me do that." Pierce's eyes held a plea. "Come voluntarily. Tell your story. Maybe the judge will listen. Maybe nothing," Jonas shouted, his hand on his knife. "This is all just pretend. Victor's already won and you know it. He's got the law on his side, got the badge, got the power. We're just kids and a woman. Nobody cares what we say." "I care," Pierce said quietly, "and Judge Morrison is a fair man. If you can give him reason to doubt Victor's fitness as a father, he might delay the custody transfer. Might give us more time to find real evidence." "Time," Evelyn repeated bitterly. "That's all anyone ever offers. More time. But time won't save us if Calder doesn't—" Her voice broke. "If he doesn't come back." "Then we pray he does," Pierce said. "In the meantime, you need to come to the courthouse.
You need to face this head on, because if you run, if you hide, Victor wins by default. At least this way you have a chance." Evelyn looked at the children. Jonah stood rigid, vibrating with helpless rage. Lila had stopped humming, her huge eyes fixed on Evelyn's face with an expression of pure trust. Trust that Evelyn would protect her. Trust that Evelyn wouldn't let the monster take her back. Trust that Evelyn was terrified she was about to betray. "All right," she said finally, her voice hollow. "We'll come." The ride into town felt like a death march. Sheriff Pierce had insisted on escorting them personally, his deputies forming a protective ring around the wagon. Maddie had refused to stay behind, bringing her rifle in a look that dared anyone to challenge her right to be there. The sun blazed mercilessly as they traveled, heat waves rising off the dirt road. Evelyn held Lila close, feeling the little girl's rapid heartbeat against her chest. Jonah sat across from them, his face like stone, his hand never leaving his knife. "What do we say?" Jonah asked suddenly. "When we're in front of the judge, what do we tell him?" "The truth," Evelyn replied, though the word felt inadequate. "We tell him everything. About your mother's death, about Victor's violence, about why we ran. He won't believe us." "He might. We have to try." "And if trying isn't enough?" Evelyn had no answer for that. The town of Helena materialized through the heat shimmer, a collection of wooden buildings clustered around a main street, dusty and sun-bleached. The courthouse sat at the end of the street, a two-story structure that somehow managed to look both official and temporary, like everything else in Montana Territory. A crowd had gathered outside. Evelyn's stomach dropped when she saw them, townspeople drawn by gossip and spectacle, curious faces turning to watch as the wagon approached. And standing on the courthouse steps, surrounded by well-dressed men who could only be lawyers, was Victor Ward. He looked exactly as Evelyn remembered, tall and handsome in a cold way, with dark hair going gray at the temples and eyes like chips of ice. He wore his marshal's badge prominently on his vest, along with an expensive suit that screamed authority and respectability. When he saw them, his mouth curved in a smile that didn't reach those frozen eyes. "Evelyn," he called out, his voice carrying across the street, "how good to see you, and my children. Jonah, Lila, come here to your father." "You're not our father," Jonah shouted back, his young voice cracking with emotion. "You're a murderer," the crowd murmured. Victor's smile never wavered, but Evelyn saw his jaw tighten fractionally. "You see?" he said to the men around him, his tone sorrowful. "You see what she's done to them? Poisoned their minds against me. Turned my own children into strangers. That's a lie." Evelyn climbed down from the wagon, her legs shaking but her voice steady. "You know it's a lie, Victor. You know exactly why we left. You know what you did." "What I did?"
Victor descended the steps slowly, deliberately, like a predator approaching wounded prey. What I did was lose my beloved wife to a tragic accident. What I did was grieve while trying to care for two traumatized children. What I did was trust you, my wife's sister, to help me through the darkest time of my life. He stopped a few feet away, and now his voice turned hard. And what did you do, Evelyn? You stole my children. You filled their heads with lies. You ran across the country like a thief in the night. I saved them from you. From me? Victor laughed, and several people in the crowd laughed with him. I'm a decorated U.S. Marshal. I've served this country for 15 years. I have commendations, references from senators and judges. What do you have? A history of mental instability.
A pattern of wild accusations. The desperate fantasies of a spinster who wanted children of her own so badly she convinced herself I was a monster. You are a monster, Jonah said, stepping forward. His hand was on his knife, and for a moment Evelyn feared he would draw it. You killed my mother. I know it. Lila knows it. We saw what you really are. Victor's expression shifted, and suddenly the mask slipped just enough for Evelyn to see the rage beneath. Boy, you will show respect. All right, that's enough. Judge Morrison appeared in the courthouse doorway, a stout man in his 60s with a no-nonsense demeanor. This is a court of law, not a circus. Everyone inside, now. The courtroom was small and stifling, with wooden benches and windows that let in light but no breeze. Judge Morrison took his seat behind a worn desk that served as a bench, while Victor and his lawyers arranged themselves on one side of the room. Evelyn and the children sat on the other side, with Sheriff Pierce standing behind them like a silent guardian. Maddie had been stopped at the door by one of the deputies, her rifle confiscated. She sat in the back row, arms crossed, glaring at Victor with undisguised hatred. This hearing, Judge Morrison began, pulling out a pair of spectacles and settling them on his nose, is to determine the immediate custody of two minor children, Jonah Ward, age 11, and Lila Ward, age 5. Their father, U.S. Marshal Victor Ward, has filed for emergency custody, claiming the children were unlawfully removed from his care by their aunt, Miss Evelyn Ward. He looked up. Is that an accurate summary? It is, Your Honor, one of Victor's lawyers said, standing smoothly. He was a polished man with an Eastern accent and expensive clothes. My client is a grieving widower who has been denied access to his own children for 6 months. During that time, Miss Evelyn Ward has taken the children across multiple territories without permission, without legal authority, and without regard for their father's parental rights. Miss Ward? The judge turned to Evelyn. Do you dispute these facts? Evelyn stood on trembling legs. She had no lawyer, no prepared statement, nothing but the truth and the desperate hope that it might be enough. I took the children because they were in danger, Your Honor, she said, her voice stronger than she felt. Because Victor Ward murdered my sister, and I feared he would harm Jonah and Lila next. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Morrison banged his gavel. That's a serious accusation, Miss Ward. Do you have evidence to support it? Lila witnessed it. She saw Victor push her mother down the stairs. Lila is 5 years old and hasn't spoken since her mother's death, Victor's lawyer interjected smoothly. Hardly a reliable witness, Your Honor. And Miss Ward's claim contradicts the official police report, which ruled Mrs. Ward's death an accident. Because Victor wrote that report. Evelyn's voice rose. He's a U.S. Marshal. He controlled the investigation. Of course he called it an accident. Your Honor, the lawyer continued, pulling out a sheaf of papers, we have documentation from 3 separate physicians stating that Rebecca Ward's death was consistent with an accidental fall. We have statements from neighbors attesting to Victor Ward's character. We have his service record showing 15 years of dedicated law enforcement. And we have, he pulled out another document, a psychiatric evaluation of Miss Evelyn Ward from 2 years ago, diagnosing her with severe anxiety and a tendency toward paranoid delusions. Evelyn felt the floor drop out from under her. That's not... I was grieving. My parents had just died, and I was struggling, but I'm not... The point is, the lawyer pressed on relentlessly, Miss Ward has a documented history of mental instability. She has made wild, unsubstantiated accusations against a decorated lawman. She has kidnapped 2 children and dragged them across the country, filling their minds with lies about their father.
The children are clearly traumatized, but not by Marshall Ward, by her. Judge Morrison looked troubled. He turned to Jonah, who sat rigid in his seat. Son, I want you to tell me the truth. Did your father hurt your mother? Jonah stood, his thin frame shaking but his voice clear. Yes, sir. He beat her. For years. I saw the bruises. And the night she died, I heard them fighting. I heard my mother scream, and when I ran to help, I saw... His voice cracked. I saw him standing at the top of the stairs, and my mother was at the bottom, and she wasn't moving. You saw him push her? I didn't see the actual push, but he was there. He was the only one there. So you didn't actually witness the act itself, Victor's lawyer pounced. You're making an assumption based on your aunt's influence. She's convinced you that your father is guilty when in fact you have no direct evidence. I know what I saw, Jonah shouted. I know what kind of man he is. You know what a frightened, traumatized child thinks he saw, the lawyer said, his tone almost gentle now. And that's understandable. You lost your mother. You're confused, angry, looking for someone to blame. But your father loves you, Jonah. He wants to help you heal. He wants his family back. Judge Morrison turned to Lila, who sat in Evelyn's lap, clutching her doll. And the little girl? What does she say? She doesn't speak, Your Honor, Evelyn said quietly. She hasn't said a word since the night Rebecca died. The trauma, selective mutism, is a common response to grief in children, Victor's lawyer said. It doesn't prove abuse. It proves she's lost her mother and needs her father's care to recover. The judge was silent for a long moment, studying the papers in front of him. Evelyn could see the decision forming in his eyes, could feel hope slipping away like water through her fingers. Your Honor, please, she said desperately. There's a doctor, Dr. Rowan Mills. He treated my sister for years. He documented her injuries, knew what was happening. If you could just wait for him to testify. Where is this doctor? Judge Morrison asked. I'm not certain. We believe he's in Silver Bow, but so you're asking me to delay this hearing on the basis of testimony from a doctor who may or may not exist, who may or may not be in Silver Bow, who may or may not have records from years ago. The judge's tone was skeptical. Miss Ward, I sympathize with your position. Truly, I do. But I can't make decisions based on speculation. I need concrete evidence, and you haven't provided any. Give me one more day, Evelyn begged. Please, just 24 hours. If the doctor doesn't appear by then, I'll accept your decision. But please don't do this now. Don't send these children back to him. Victor stood, his voice oozing false concern. Your Honor, I understand my sister-in-law is desperate, but every day my children spend with her is another day of trauma, another day they're told lies about their father. For their sake, I ask that you end this immediately. Let me take my children home where they belong. Judge Morrison removed his spectacles, rubbing his eyes wearily. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with reluctance. Miss Ward, I want to believe you. I truly do. But without evidence, without corroboration, without any proof beyond your word and a child's confused memories, I cannot justify keeping these children from their legal guardian. Marshall Ward has presented compelling documentation of his fitness as a parent. You have presented accusations and fears. He paused. I'm sorry. But my decision is to return Jonah and Lila Ward to their father's custody, effective immediately. The words landed like a death sentence. Evelyn felt Lila's small body go rigid in her arms. Jonah made a sound like a wounded animal. Even Maddie gasped from the back of the room. No, Evelyn whispered. No, please. The decision is final, Judge Morrison said, though he looked genuinely pained. Marshall Ward, you may... The courthouse doors burst open. Every head turned as Calder Hayes strode into the room, covered in trail dust and sweat, his face haggard from days of hard riding. And beside him walked an older man with silver hair and a black medical bag, his clothes rumpled but his eyes sharp and intelligent. Your Honor, Calder said, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. My name is Calder Hayes, and this is Dr. Rowan Mills. We request permission to present evidence in this case. Judge Morrison stared. Victor's face went pale, then red with fury. This is highly irregular, the judge said. This hearing is concluded. Then reopen it,
Calder interrupted. Because what Dr. Mills has to say changes everything. The judge looked from Calder to the doctor to Victor, whose expression had transformed into something savage beneath the veneer of respectability. Your Honor, Victor's lawyer said quickly, this is nothing more than a delay tactic. We have no idea who this man is or what he... I know exactly who he is, Dr. Mills said, his voice calm but carrying an undertone of steel. He moved forward, setting his medical bag on a table with a heavy thump. I was the Ward family physician in Philadelphia for 6 years. I treated Rebecca Ward on multiple occasions for injuries I documented extensively, and I can prove beyond any doubt that Victor Ward systematically abused his wife until the night he finally killed her. The courtroom exploded. People shouted, the judge banged his gavel, Victor lunged forward before his lawyers grabbed him. In the chaos, Evelyn clutched Lila tighter and met Calder's eyes across the room. He looked exhausted, battered by the journey, but his gaze held steady. He'd done it. He'd actually done it. Order, Judge Morrison roared, slamming his gavel repeatedly. I will have order in this courtroom. Slowly, the noise subsided. The judge pointed at Dr. Mills. You say you have evidence? I do, Your Honor. Dr. Mills opened his bag and pulled out a thick ledger. This is my medical journal from my time in Philadelphia. It contains dated entries for every treatment I provided to Rebecca Ward. He opened it, flipping through pages. March 17th, 1874. Patient presented with bruising to the ribs and upper arms, consistent with gripping and blunt force trauma. Patient claimed to have fallen, but injuries suggest otherwise. June 2nd, 1874. Patient presented with a broken wrist, facial contusions, and defensive wounds on her forearms. Again, patient claimed accident, but pattern indicates domestic violence. He continued reading, his voice never wavering, documenting years of abuse in clinical, devastating detail. With each entry, Victor's expression grew darker, his lawyers' faces more troubled. October 15th, 1874. Patient presented with bruising around her throat, consistent with strangulation. She broke down during the examination and confessed her husband was responsible. I urged her to press charges. She refused, citing fear for her children's safety. Dr. Mills looked up, his eyes boring into Victor. I documented everything because I knew that one day this man would kill her, and I was right. Your Honor, this is hearsay, Victor's lawyer protested, but his voice lacked conviction. These are old notes. They don't prove... They prove a pattern, Judge Morrison said quietly. He gestured to Dr. Mills. Continue. The last time I saw Rebecca Ward alive was January 10th, 1875. She came to me with cracked ribs and a concussion. She told me Victor had beaten her because dinner was late. She was terrified, talking about running away with the children. I gave her money for train tickets. I told her she had to leave before it was too late. Dr. Mills's voice grew thick with emotion. 2 weeks later, I received news that she died in a fall down the stairs. I didn't believe it then. I don't believe it now. The judge turned to Victor, whose mask had finally shattered completely. His face was twisted with rage, his hands clenched into fists. Marshal Ward, do you have a response to these allegations? This is a conspiracy, Victor snarled. A fabrication designed to destroy me. That woman, he pointed at Evelyn, she's convinced this doctor to lie. She's paying him, bribing him. I don't know, but it's all false. I kept photographic evidence, Doctor, Mills said calmly. He reached into his bag again and pulled out a folder. These are pictures I took of Rebecca's injuries over the years, with her permission, for documentation purposes. He laid the photographs on the judge's desk. Evelyn couldn't see them from where she sat, but she saw Judge Morrison's face go gray. Saw him flip through the images, his expression hardening with each one. Dear God, the judge whispered. Your Honor, photographs can be doctored. They can be... Enough! Judge Morrison's voice cut through the lawyer's protests like a blade. He stood, and when he spoke again, his tone was glacial. I have seen enough evidence to believe that Victor Ward poses a credible threat to his children. I am hereby reversing my earlier decision. Custody of Jonah and Lila Ward is to remain with their aunt, Evelyn Ward, pending a full criminal investigation into Rebecca Ward's death. You can't do this, Victor roared, surging to his feet.
I have rights. I'm a U.S. Marshal. You can't just... You're a murderer, Judge Morrison said flatly, and I'm ordering your immediate arrest on suspicion of domestic violence and manslaughter. Sheriff Pierce? Pierce moved forward, his hand on his gun. Victor Ward, you're under arrest. What happened next occurred so fast that later Evelyn would struggle to remember the exact sequence of events. Victor's hand flashed to his belt, drawing a concealed pistol. People screamed, diving for cover. Pierce drew his own gun, but Victor was faster, firing a shot that splintered the wood near the sheriff's head. "Nobody move!" Victor shouted, swinging the gun around wildly. His eyes found Lila, still in Evelyn's lap. "Give me my daughter. Give her to me now, or I start killing people." "Don't do this," Evelyn said, her voice shaking. She held Lila tighter, feeling the little girl's silent terror. "Don't make it worse." "Worse?" Victor laughed, a terrible sound. "How could it be worse? You've taken everything from me. My wife, my children, my reputation. You've destroyed my life with your lies." "They're not lies," Jonah said. He'd somehow moved during the chaos, positioning himself between Victor and Evelyn. His knife was in his hand now, held with a competence that spoke of training and determination. "Everything Dr. Mills said is true. Everything Aunt Evelyn said is true. You killed my mother, and you're not taking Lila. You're not taking either of us. Boy, put down that knife." Victor's gun centered on Jonah's chest. "I'm your father. You will obey me." "You're not my father. You're nothing." For a moment, the world hung suspended. Evelyn could hear her own heartbeat, feel Lila's rapid breathing, see the calculation in Victor's eyes as he decided whether to shoot. Then Calder moved. He'd been standing near the wall, unnoticed in the chaos. Now he crossed the distance between himself and Victor in 3 long strides, grabbing the man's gun hand and wrenching it upward. The pistol discharged, the bullet burying itself in the ceiling. Men shouted, rushed forward. Victor and Calder went down in a tangle of limbs, fighting for control of the weapon. They rolled across the floor, smashing into benches, both men's faces contorted with effort. Victor was younger, trained in combat, but Calder was fueled by something stronger than training. He was protecting his family. The gun went skittering across the floor. Pierce dove for it, securing it before turning to help Calder. Together they wrestled Victor into submission, though the man fought like a wild animal, screaming obscenities and threats. "You're all dead!" he shrieked as Pierce snapped handcuffs on his wrists. "All of you! I'll kill you! I'll find you, and I'll kill you!" "Shut up," Pierce said, hauling Victor to his feet. "Deputies, get him out of here, and keep him away from sharp objects." They dragged Victor from the courtroom, his threats and curses echoing down the hallway until a door slammed, cutting off the sound. Silence fell, broken only by ragged breathing and the soft sound of Lila's humming. She'd started again during the fight, that wordless melody, her mind retreating to the only safe place it knew. Judge Morrison slowly sat back down, his hands shaking as he tried to restore order to his disheveled papers. "Miss Ward," he said finally, "I apologize. I nearly made a terrible mistake." Evelyn couldn't respond. She was shaking too hard, her arms locked around Lila, tears streaming down her face. Calder approached slowly, carefully, like someone approaching a frightened animal. His shirt was torn, blood on his lip where Victor had landed a blow, but his eyes were gentle. "It's over," he said quietly. "It's really over." Evelyn looked up at him through her tears. This man who'd been a stranger days ago. This man who'd ridden hundreds of miles to save them. This man who'd fought for them, risked everything for them. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know how to thank you." "You already did, by trusting me." Calder glanced at Jonah, who stood nearby still gripping his knife, his young face stunned. "You all right, son?" Jonah nodded jerkily. Then his composure cracked, and suddenly he was crying, great gasping sobs that shook his thin frame. Evelyn reached for him with one arm, pulling him close, and he collapsed against her, all his fear and rage and relief pouring out at once. Dr. Mills approached, his lined face kind. "The children will need care, professional care, the trauma they've experienced." He looked at Lila, who stared at nothing, humming. "Especially the little one. Selective mutism can last months, even years. She'll need patience, safety, consistency." "She'll have it,"
Evelyn said fiercely. They both will, I promise you that. I believe you, Dr. Mills smiled. And if you need anything, I'm staying in Silver Bow for the foreseeable future. Mr. Hayes knows how to find me. Judge Morrison cleared his throat. There will need to be a formal custody hearing, Miss Ward. A proper one, with all the legal paperwork. But I can tell you now that you'll be granted guardianship. No judge in their right mind would rule otherwise after what we've seen today. Thank you, Your Honor. Don't thank me. Thank Mr. Hayes and Dr. Mills. They're the ones who saved those children. The judge stood. This hearing is adjourned. Sheriff, make sure Victor Ward is secured. I want guards on him day and night until we can transport him to a federal prison. People began filing out of the courtroom, buzzing with shock and gossip. Maddie appeared beside them, her face pale but her expression fierce. Is everyone okay? She asked. We're okay, Evelyn said. She looked at Maddie, seeing past the girl's tough exterior to the fear beneath. Thanks to your father. Maddie looked at Calder, and something passed between them, understanding, maybe. Forgiveness. Her hand reached out and gripped his arm briefly. You came back, she said quietly. Of course I came back. Calder's voice was rough with emotion. I'll always come back. As they walked out of the courthouse into the blazing afternoon sun, Evelyn felt something shift inside her. The fear that had been her constant companion for 6 months began to loosen its grip. Not gone. It would take time for that, but diminished. Victor Ward was in custody. The children were safe. And somehow, impossibly, they'd found refuge with a stranger who'd become something more. Jonah walked beside Calder, the man's hand resting on the boy's shoulder in a gesture of protection and comfort. Maddie carried Lila, murmuring softly to her, and Evelyn followed, feeling the Montana sun on her face, warm but no longer threatening. For the first time in longer than she could remember, the heat didn't feel like punishment. It felt like life. They didn't speak much on the ride back to the ranch. The wagon creaked through the afternoon heat, dust rising in lazy clouds behind them. But the oppressive weight that had pressed down on them for days had finally lifted. Evelyn held Lila in her lap, feeling the little girl's body gradually relax as the miles passed and the courthouse fell behind them. Jonah sat beside Calder on the driver's bench, his knife finally sheathed, his shoulders slowly coming down from their rigid defensive position. Maddie rode alongside on her horse, occasionally glancing at them with an expression Evelyn couldn't quite read. Not hostility anymore. Something softer. Something like acceptance, maybe. Or at least the beginning of it. As the ranch came into view, its weathered buildings golden in the late afternoon sun, Evelyn felt an unexpected sense of homecoming. She'd only been here 3 days. 3 days that felt like 3 years. But something about the place had already embedded itself in her chest, taken root in ways she hadn't anticipated. Calder pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house and climbed down stiffly, his body clearly feeling the effects of days of hard riding and the fight with Victor. He reached up to help Evelyn down, his hand steady and warm. You should rest, she said, noting the exhaustion in his face. You've barely slept. Neither have you. His voice was quiet, meant only for her. But you're right. We could all use rest. Real rest. Without fear. The words settled over them like a blessing. Rest without fear. What a luxury that seemed now. Inside the house, the air was cooler, dimmer. Evelyn settled Lila on the sofa with her doll, then turned to find Maddie standing in the doorway, still holding her rifle. I'm sorry, the girl said abruptly. Evelyn blinked. What? I'm sorry for how I've been, for the things I said, for... Maddie's jaw worked, emotions flickering across her face. For not trusting my father's judgment. He knew what he was doing when he brought you here. I just couldn't see it. You were protecting him, Evelyn said gently. And yourself. There's nothing to apologize for. There is, though. Maddie set her rifle by the door and moved further into the room. I see it now. What you did for those kids, the risk you took, the sacrifice. You could have stayed in Philadelphia, safe and comfortable, but you chose to fight. You chose them. She glanced at Lila, then back to Evelyn. My mother would have done the same thing. She would have liked you." The words hit harder than Evelyn expected. She felt tears prick her eyes, but blinked them back. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That means more than you know." Calder emerged from his bedroom, having changed out of his trail-dusty clothes into clean ones. He looked at the two women standing together, and something in his expression softened. "Maddie, you hungry? I could use help preparing supper." It was an olive branch, and Maddie took it. "Yeah, I'm starving, actually." They moved to the kitchen together, father and daughter working in practice coordination. Evelyn watched them for a moment, seeing the easy comfort between them despite the tension of recent days. Then she turned her attention to Jonah, who'd been standing by the window, silent and still. "Jonah? You all right?" He turned to face her, and she was startled to see tears on his cheeks. "I thought we were going to lose," he said, his voice breaking. "When the judge said we had to go back to him, I thought that was it, that we'd fought so hard and it didn't matter. But it did matter. We won. Because Mr. Hayes saved us. Because he rode all the way to Silverbow and found Dr. Mills and brought him back in time." Jonah wiped his face roughly. "I didn't think anyone would do that for us. I didn't think anyone cared enough." Evelyn moved to him, kneeling down so they were eye level. "People care, Jonah. Good people exist. I know it's hard to believe after everything Victor did, after all the times the law failed to protect your mother. But good people are real. Mr. Hayes proved that." "I don't know how to thank him." "Then just tell him." Jonah nodded, squaring his shoulders. He walked to the kitchen where Calder was slicing bread while Maddie worked the stove. The man looked up as Jonah approached. "Sir," Jonah said formally, his voice still thick with emotion, "I want to thank you for everything you did, for risking your life to help us when you didn't have to. I won't forget it. Ever." Calder set down the knife and turned to face the boy fully. For a moment he just studied him, this thin child who'd been forced to grow up too fast, who carried a knife and knew how to use it, who'd seen horrors no child should witness. "You're welcome," Calder said finally. "But Jonah, I want you to understand something. I didn't just do it for you and Lila. I did it because it was right. Because letting Victor win would have been wrong, and I couldn't live with myself if I'd turned you away." He paused. "And I did it because somewhere along the way you all stopped being strangers. You became family." The word hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Family. Not by blood or law, but by choice. By shared struggle and mutual protection. By the kind of bonds forged in fire. Jonah's composure cracked completely then. He moved forward impulsively, wrapping his arms around Calder's waist, burying his face in the man's shirt. Calder's hands came up, one settling on the boy's shoulder, the other on his head, holding him steady as he cried. Maddie watched with shining eyes, then turned away to hide her own tears. Evelyn felt her heart swell with something she couldn't quite name. Hope, maybe. Or the beginning of healing. That night they ate together at the table, all 5 of them, the food simple but plentiful. Lila sat between Evelyn and Maddie, carefully eating bread with butter. Her movements still mechanical, but less haunted. The humming had stopped, at least for now. As darkness fell and the temperature finally dropped to something bearable, they lingered at the table, nobody quite ready to break apart yet. "What happens now?" Maddie asked. "With Victor, will there be a trial?" "There will," Calder confirmed. "Sheriff Pierce said it could take months to organize, bring in witnesses, build the case. But with Dr. Mills's testimony and evidence, the outcome isn't really in doubt." "He'll hang," Jonah said flatly. "Not a question, a statement." "Most likely." Calder didn't sugarcoat it. "Is that something you can live with?" Jonah was quiet for a long moment. "I used to dream about killing him myself, used to imagine all the ways I could do it, but now," he shook his head, "now I just want him gone. However that happens, I just want to never see him again." "You won't have to," Evelyn promised. "We're safe now. All of us." But even as she said it, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered that safety was never guaranteed, that Victor was still alive, still dangerous, still consumed with rage at what they'd done to him. She pushed the thought away. Tonight, they would celebrate their victory. Tomorrow's worries could wait. The days that followed settled into an unexpected rhythm. Evelyn had arrived expecting to be a mail-order bride, a wife, with all the duties and obligations that entailed. But Calder never pressed the issue. They existed in a strange limbo, sharing his house but not his name, caring for the children together but maintaining a careful distance. It was Maddie who finally addressed it, finding Evelyn alone in the kitchen one morning nearly a week after the courthouse confrontation. "Are you going to marry him?" the girl asked bluntly. Evelyn's hands stilled over the dishes she was washing. "I don't know. But that's why you came here, right? To be his wife?" "I came here to escape Victor. The marriage advertisement was just a means to an end." Evelyn dried her hands on a towel, choosing her words carefully. "Your father is a good man, Maddie. One of the best I've ever known. But he doesn't owe me marriage just because he helped us, and I won't trap him into something he might regret." "What if he wants to marry you? Has he said something to you?" "No, but I see the way he looks at you." Maddie's tone was matter-of-fact. "Like you're something precious. Like he's afraid you might disappear if he looks away too long." Evelyn felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I think you're imagining things." "I'm not. And for what it's worth," Maddie took a breath, "I think my mother would approve. I think she'd want my father to be happy again, to have someone who makes him laugh, who gives him purpose beyond just surviving." She met Evelyn's eyes directly. "You do that. You make him come alive in ways I haven't seen in years." Before Evelyn could respond, Jonah burst through the door, his face pale. "Sheriff's here," he said urgently, "and he looks upset." They all moved to the porch where Sheriff Pierce was dismounting, his expression grim. Calder emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on his work pants. "Alden," he greeted the sheriff, "what brings you out here?" "Bad news, I'm afraid." Pierce climbed the porch steps heavily. "Victor Ward escaped custody 3 days ago." The world seemed to tilt. Evelyn felt Jonah go rigid beside her, felt her own breath catch in her chest. "How?" Calder's voice was dangerously quiet. "He had help. 2 of his men, probably the same ones who rode out here before, ambushed the transport wagon taking him to Billings. Killed 1 deputy, wounded another. Victor took their horses and weapons and disappeared into the Badlands. So he's out there." Evelyn's voice came out barely above a whisper. "Somewhere. Free." "Not for long," Pierce said firmly. "We've got pauses out searching. The U.S. Marshal Service has issued a warrant for his arrest. He's one of their own gone rogue. They want him bad. Every lawman in 3 territories is looking for him." "That doesn't help us if he comes here first," Maddie said, her hand already moving toward where she'd leaned her rifle. "That's why I came to warn you. Victor's last known direction was south, toward Wyoming. But he's unpredictable, dangerous, and he's got nothing left to lose. You need to be prepared." "We will be." Calder's jaw was set in hard lines. "Thank you for the warning, Alden." After Pierce left, they gathered in the house to discuss options. Jonah wanted to run again, to keep moving until Victor was caught or killed. Maddie argued for fortifying the ranch, setting watches, preparing for a siege. Evelyn just felt numb, the brief taste of safety evaporating like morning dew under the merciless sun. "We can't let fear control us," Calder said finally. "Victor wants us afraid, wants us running, but this is our home. We stay, we prepare, but we don't stop living." "What if he comes?" Lila's voice was so small, so unexpected, that everyone froze. The little girl had spoken. For the first time in 6 months, she'd actually spoken. Evelyn dropped to her knees beside her, heart pounding. "Lila, sweetheart? What if the bad man comes?" Lila's huge eyes were fixed on Evelyn's face. "What if he takes me away?" Tears streamed down Evelyn's face, but she kept her voice steady. "He won't. I promise you, baby. We won't let him." "You promise?" Such trust in those 2 words, such desperate need to believe. "I promise." Evelyn pulled her close, rocking her gently. "You're safe here. We'll keep you safe." Jonah was crying too, overcome with hearing his sister's voice again. Even Maddie looked emotional, turning away to hide her face. Calder moved to them, kneeling beside Evelyn and Lila. "Lila, look at me." He waited until she met his eyes. "Your Aunt Evelyn is right. We're all going to protect you.
Your brother, Miss Maddie, me, your aunt. We're a family now. And families protect each other. Do you understand? Lila nodded slowly. You're not bad like him? No, honey, I'm not. Promise? I promise. She seemed to accept this, nestling closer to Evelyn with a sigh. Within minutes, exhausted by the emotional breakthrough, she was asleep. She spoke, Jonah whispered, wonder in his voice. After all this time, she finally spoke. The trauma's breaking, Maddie said quietly. She's starting to heal. That night, they set watches. Calder took first shift, Maddie second, Jonah third despite protests about his age. Evelyn tried to sleep but couldn't, her mind spinning with possibilities. Victor was out there somewhere, hunting them. He'd killed to escape. He wouldn't stop until he was caught or dead. She rose in the darkness and found Calder on the porch, rifle across his lap, staring out at the moonlit valley. Couldn't sleep? He asked without turning. No. She sat beside him, careful to maintain some distance. I keep thinking I've brought this nightmare to your door. You and Maddie were safe before we arrived. Now you're in danger because of us. Stop. Calder's voice was firm but gentle. We've been over this. You didn't bring the nightmare. You were trying to escape it. There's a difference. Is there? Maddie could get hurt. You could get hurt, all because I answered your advertisement and brought trouble with me. Calder was quiet for a moment, his profile sharp in the moonlight. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight of consideration, of words chosen carefully. When Sarah died, I thought my life was over. Not literally, but in every way that mattered. I kept going for Maddie's sake, kept the ranch running, kept breathing, but I wasn't living, I was just existing. He turned to look at her fully. Then you showed up with 2 terrified children and a killer on your trail, and suddenly I had a reason to fight again. A purpose beyond just surviving another day. I don't understand. You woke me up, Evelyn, made me remember what it means to stand for something, to protect people who need protecting, to be the kind of man my daughter could be proud of. He reached out, his calloused hand covering hers. So no, you didn't bring trouble to my door. You brought life, challenge, meaning, and I wouldn't trade that for anything. Evelyn stared at him, feeling something shift in her chest. Calder. I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I know you came here out of desperation, not choice. I know you don't owe me anything just because I helped, but I want you to know that having you here, having all of you here, it's been a gift, not a burden. It's been a gift for me too, Evelyn said softly. I came here expecting duty and obligation, maybe loneliness in a different form, but instead I found... She struggled for the right words. I found home. Real home, not just a place, but people who care, who fight for each other. Is that enough? Calder asked. To build something on? A home, a family, a future? I don't know. I haven't thought that far ahead. I've been too busy trying to survive. Then maybe it's time to start thinking about more than survival, about what comes next once Victor is dealt with. Before Evelyn could respond, a sound cut through the night. Distant but distinct. Hoofbeats. Moving fast. Calder was on his feet instantly, rifle raised. Inside. Now! Wake the others! Evelyn ran, her heart hammering. She shook Maddie awake first, then Jonah. Someone's coming! Calder says... I heard! Maddie was already grabbing her rifle, her movements practiced and efficient. Jonah, get Lila to the back bedroom. Stay with her. Don't come out no matter what you hear. But do it! Maddie's voice had the snap of command. We need you protecting your sister, not getting in the way. Jonah wanted to argue, but recognized the sense in it. He gathered Lila, still half asleep, and carried her to the back of the house. Evelyn and Maddie joined Calder on the porch, positioning themselves at different angles to cover the approach. The hoofbeats grew louder, closer. A single rider moving at breakneck speed through the darkness. Hold your fire, Calder commanded. Let's see who it is first. The rider burst into the yard, his horse lathered and blowing. In the moonlight, Evelyn recognized Sheriff Pierce's deputy, Thomas Grant. Don't shoot, he called out. It's Thomas Grant, I got news. Calder lowered his rifle but didn't relax. What news? Thomas dismounted quickly, his young face flushed with excitement and exhaustion. Victor Ward's dead.
They got him this afternoon in the Wyoming Badlands. U.S. Marshal team caught up to him near the border. He drew on them, and they shot him dead. The words seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Victor Ward, dead. You're certain? Evelyn's voice shook. You're absolutely certain? Yes, ma'am. Sheriff Pierce sent me to tell you soon as we got word. Victor Ward is dead and gone. Can't hurt anyone ever again. Evelyn's legs gave out. She sank down onto the porch step, her whole body trembling with relief so intense it felt like pain. Maddie lowered her rifle, her face stunned. Calder just stood there, processing, making sure he'd heard correctly. How did it happen? He asked finally. From what we heard, the marshals tracked him to a canyon, called for him to surrender. He opened fire instead, killed one marshal, wounded 2 others. They returned fire and put 3 bullets in him. He died before they could get him to a doctor. Thomas shifted his weight. They're bringing the body back to Helena for identification. Sheriff says if any of you want to see him, confirm it's really him, you're welcome to. No. Evelyn's voice was firm. I don't need to see him. I just need to know he's gone. Then he's gone, ma'am. For good. After Thomas rode away, carrying their thanks and heading back to town, the 3 of them stood on the porch in silence. The night had returned to its peaceful stillness, crickets chirping, a light breeze rustling through the grass. It's over, Maddie said wonderingly. It's actually over. Not quite. Calder was still holding his rifle, still scanning the darkness with habitual caution. There's still the legal custody hearing, getting formal guardianship for the children. But the threat... He finally relaxed, lowering the weapon. The threat is gone. Evelyn stood on shaking legs and moved to the door. I need to tell Jonah. He needs to know. She found him in the back bedroom, sitting on the bed with Lila sleeping beside him, his knife in his hand. The relief on his face when she told him was almost painful to witness. He's really dead? The boy's voice cracked. Victor's really gone? He's gone. You're free, Jonah. Both of you. Truly free. Jonah set down the knife, his hand shaking. Then he did something Evelyn had never seen him do. He smiled. A real smile, reaching his eyes, transforming his careworn face back into that of a child. We can stop running, he said, almost disbelieving. We can just stop. We can stop. Evelyn sat beside him, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. We can rest. We can heal. We can build a real life here, if that's what you want. Is it what you want? Evelyn thought about Calder's words on the porch, about home and family and futures. Yes, she said slowly. I think it is. The next few days passed in a strange, dreamlike quality. The constant vigilance that had defined their existence gradually loosened. Jonah stopped carrying his knife everywhere. Lila began speaking more, her vocabulary returning in fits and starts, testing her voice after months of silence. Maddie laughed more easily. Even the ranch itself seemed lighter somehow, as if the lifting of the threat had changed the very air they breathed. A week after Victor's death, Evelyn was hanging laundry in the yard when Calder approached. He'd been working with the horses all morning, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his face sunburned. Can we talk? He asked. Of course. Evelyn set down the basket of wet clothes, brushing her hands on her apron. I've been thinking about something. About us and the children and what happens next. Evelyn's heart picked up speed. All right. You came here to be my wife. That was the agreement. But things changed. The situation became about survival, not marriage. And I don't want you feeling obligated to honor that agreement now that the danger's passed. You're free to stay as long as you need, help raise the kids, but without any expectations. What if I don't want to be free of expectations? The words came out before Evelyn could stop them. Calder's eyes widened. What? What if I want... Evelyn took a breath, steadying herself. What if I want to honor that agreement, not out of obligation, but because I choose to? Because in the past 2 weeks, I've seen the kind of man you are. The way you protect, the way you love your daughter, the way you treat Jonah and Lila like they're your own, the way you... She faltered, feeling heat rise in her cheeks.
The way you look at me sometimes, like I matter. You do matter. Calder moved closer, his voice rough with emotion. Evelyn, you matter more than I know how to say. When I placed that advertisement, I thought I was looking for a housekeeper, someone to help with the ranch. But what I found was... He stopped, shaking his head. I found someone brave and fierce and willing to sacrifice everything for the people she loves. I found someone who makes me want to be better, to do better. Then marry me, Evelyn said, surprising herself with her boldness. Not because of an advertisement or an agreement, but because we both choose it, because we want to build something together, a family, a home, a future. Calder's answer was to pull her close and kiss her, gentle but sure, a promise sealed without words. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Evelyn saw Maddie watching from the porch with a satisfied smile. About time, the girl called out. I was starting to think I'd have to lock you two in a room together. Evelyn laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. How long have you been standing there? Long enough. Maddie came down the steps, her expression warm. So, does this mean we're really going to be a family? Officially? If that's all right with you, Calder said. It's more than all right. Maddie looked at Evelyn. Welcome home. Officially. That evening, they gathered around the table for supper. All 5 of them, with the addition of Sheriff Pierce, who'd ridden out with the official custody papers granting Evelyn full legal guardianship of Jonah and Lila. Judge Morrison signed off this morning, Pierce explained, sliding the documents across the table. Those kids are yours now, Miss Ward. Free and clear. No one can challenge it. Thank you, Sheriff. Evelyn's hands trembled as she looked at the papers. For everything you've done. Just doing my job. Eventually. Pierce had the grace to look sheepish. I'm sorry I didn't act faster at first. Should have trusted my gut instead of the legal documents. You came through when it mattered, Calder said. That's what counts. After Pierce left and they'd finished eating, Calder stood and cleared his throat. I've got an announcement, he said. Evelyn and I have decided to get married. Soon. We figured we'd have a small ceremony here at the ranch, just family and a few friends. If everyone's agreeable to that? Very agreeable, Maddie said immediately. Jonah looked between them, a slow smile spreading across his face. Does this mean we're staying here? For good? If you want to, Evelyn said. This can be your home, Jonah. Yours and Lila's, for as long as you need it. Forever then, Jonah said firmly, because I don't ever want to leave. Lila, who'd been listening quietly, spoke up in her small voice. Will you be my mama now? Since my real mama is in heaven? Evelyn felt tears sting her eyes. I can never replace your mother, sweetheart, but I will love you like she did. I'll protect you and care for you and be here for you always. Is that enough? Yes. Lila nodded solemnly. That's enough. The wedding took place 2 weeks later on a Sunday afternoon, with the summer heat finally beginning to ease into early autumn. They kept it simple. Just Sheriff Pierce officiating, Dr. Mills, who'd ridden down from Silverbow, a few neighbors from nearby ranches, and the immediate family. Evelyn wore a dress Maddie had helped her make from fabric they'd bought in town, simple but elegant in cream-colored cotton. Wildflowers from the valley served as decorations, their colors bright against the weathered wood of the porch where they held the ceremony. As Calder took her hand and spoke his vows, Evelyn felt the weight of the past months finally begin to lift. The fear, the running, the constant vigilance, all of it receding like shadows at sunrise. I promise to protect you, Calder said, his voice steady and sure. To stand beside you through whatever comes. To be a father to Jonah and Lila. To honor their mother's memory while helping them build a new life. And I promise to love you, not just today, but every day we're given. You came to me as a stranger, but you've become my family, my heart, my home. Evelyn's own vows were simpler but no less heartfelt. I came here desperate and afraid, looking only for escape. But you gave me something far greater, hope, a second chance, a family. I promise to love you faithfully, to stand with you through hard times and good, to help raise our children with kindness and strength. You saved us, Calder.
Now let me spend the rest of my life proving that your faith in us wasn't misplaced." When Pierce pronounced them husband and wife, and Calder kissed her gently while their small gathering applauded, Evelyn felt something inside her finally settle, like a ship finding harbor after a long storm, like coming home after years of wandering. The celebration afterward was modest but joyful. Someone had brought a fiddle, and they danced in the yard as the sun sank toward the mountains. Jonah actually laughed, a sound Evelyn hadn't heard in so long she'd almost forgotten what it sounded like. Lila danced with Maddie, her small feet trying to keep up with the older girl's steps, giggling when she stumbled. As darkness fell and their guests began to depart, Calder pulled Evelyn aside. "Happy?" he asked. "More than I ever thought possible." She leaned into him, feeling his solid warmth, his steadiness. "When I left Philadelphia, I thought my life was over, that the best I could hope for was survival. But this," she gestured at their family, at the ranch, at the vast Montana sky now filling with stars. "This is so much more than survival. This is living." "We'll have hard times ahead," Calder cautioned. "Ranch life isn't easy. The winters are brutal, the work is endless, and we're taking on 2 traumatized children who will need years of patience and care." "I know, but we'll face it together. That makes all the difference." They stood together in the darkness, watching Maddie teach Jonah how to dance properly while Lila clapped along, her voice joining the music in wordless melody. The girl was healing, slowly but surely. They all were. That night, after the children had been put to bed and the house had settled into quiet, Evelyn sat on the porch with Calder, listening to the sounds of the Montana night. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Closer by, the horses nickered in the barn. The air was warm but no longer oppressive, carrying the promise of cooler days ahead. "Do you regret it?" Calder asked quietly. "Answering that advertisement, coming here." Evelyn thought about everything that had happened. The terror, the flight, the confrontation with Victor, the days of fear and uncertainty. And then she thought about what came after. The safety, the love, the family they were building from broken pieces. "No," she said firmly, "not for a single moment. You asked for one bride," Calder Hayes. "But what you got was a whole family. Broken, maybe. Damaged, certainly. But alive and healing and full of hope." She turned to look at him in the starlight. "Was that enough? Are we enough?" Calder's answer was to pull her close, his arms strong and sure around her. "You're more than enough," he said against her hair. "You're everything." And sitting there in the warm Montana night, surrounded by the family they'd chosen and the life they were building together, Evelyn finally believed him. The mail-order bride who'd brought 2 sisters and a nightmare had found something she'd never expected. She'd found home. The days following the wedding slipped into weeks, and the weeks into months, each one building upon the last like stones in a foundation. The summer heat gradually gave way to autumn's cooler breath, painting the valley in shades of amber and rust. The work on the ranch continued its endless cycle, but now there were more hands to share the burden, and the labor felt less like survival and more like purpose. Evelyn woke each morning to the unfamiliar comfort of Calder's presence beside her, his steady breathing a reminder that she was no longer alone in her struggles. The first few weeks of marriage had been an adjustment, learning each other's rhythms, navigating the intimacy of shared space, building trust through small, daily kindnesses. But gradually, the awkwardness faded, replaced by a partnership that felt both new and ancient, as if they'd been meant for each other all along. The children were changing too, in ways both subtle and profound. Jonah had begun working alongside Calder each morning, learning the intricacies of ranch management with an intensity that spoke of his need to feel useful, to prove his worth. Calder was patient with him, showing him how to mend fences, care for the cattle, read the weather signs in the mountains. The boy soaked up every lesson like parched earth receiving rain. One crisp October morning, Evelyn watched from the kitchen window as Calder taught Jonah to shoe a horse. The man's large hands guided the boy's smaller ones, showing him how to trim the hoof, fit the shoe, drive the nails with precision. Jonah's face was tight with concentration. His tongue caught between his teeth as he worked. "Not bad," Calder said when the job was finished. "Few more years of practice, you'll be better at this than me." "Really?"
The hope in Jonah's voice was almost painful to hear. Really? You've got steady hands and a good eye. That's half the battle. Calder straightened, stretching his back. You know, I've been thinking. Once winter passes and spring comes around, we'll need to expand the herd, take on more grazing land. It's a big job. Need someone reliable to help manage it. You mean, you want me to help? I mean, I need you to help. Can't do it alone anymore. Getting too old. Calder's tone was light, but his eyes were serious. What do you say? You ready to be my right hand? Jonah's face transformed, years of pain and doubt momentarily erased by pure joy. Yes, sir, I'm ready. Evelyn turned away from the window, blinking back tears. Calder had a gift for this, for seeing what people needed and giving it to them without making it feel like charity. Jonah needed to feel valued, needed to know he had a place and a purpose. And Calder was providing both. Lila's healing was slower but no less real. The little girl still had nightmares, still sometimes retreated into silence when the memories grew too heavy. But the good days outnumbered the bad now. She followed Maddie everywhere, watching the older girl with worshipful eyes, imitating her movements, asking endless questions in that small, tentative voice that grew stronger with each passing week. Why do horses sleep standing up? Lila asked one afternoon as they all gathered in the barn for evening chores. Because they're prey animals, Maddie explained, brushing out her horse's mane. They need to be ready to run if danger comes. Sleeping standing up means they can escape faster. Are we prey animals? The question hung in the air, heavier than it should have been. Maddie set down the brush and knelt beside Lila, meeting her eyes directly. No, honey, we're not prey. Not anymore. The danger is gone. We don't have to be ready to run. Promise? Promise. Maddie pulled her into a hug. You're safe here. We're all safe. Later that night, after the children had gone to bed, Maddie found Evelyn in the kitchen preparing bread dough for tomorrow's baking. Can I help? The girl asked. Of course. Evelyn made room at the table, showing Maddie how to knead the dough properly. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, the rhythmic push and fold soothing in its repetition. She's getting better, Maddie said finally. Lila, she smiled today, really smiled, not just the polite kind. She was laughing at something Jonah said. I know. I saw it too. Evelyn shaped her dough into a ball, setting it aside to rise. It's remarkable, isn't it? How resilient children are, how they can survive the worst things and still find reasons to laugh. My mother used to say that healing isn't forgetting. It's learning to carry the weight without letting it crush you. Maddie's hand stilled in the dough. I didn't understand what she meant when she said it, but I think I do now. Your mother was a wise woman. She was. Maddie looked at Evelyn, her expression open in a way it hadn't been before. You know, when my father first told me he was advertising for a wife, I was so angry. I felt like he was trying to replace her, like he thought any woman could just step into her place and everything would be fine. And now? Now I realize he wasn't trying to replace her. He was trying to survive. And you? Maddie took a breath. You're not trying to be her. You're just being you, and that's enough. More than enough. Evelyn reached across the table, covering Maddie's flour-dusted hand with her own. Thank you for giving me a chance. I know it wasn't easy. Nothing worth having ever is, Maddie squeezed her hand. But you're family now, really family, and I'm glad. The conversation marked a turning point. After that night, the last walls between them came down. Maddie began seeking Evelyn's advice on things she'd never have asked before. Questions about boys who came calling from neighboring ranches, about her future, about the woman she wanted to become. And Evelyn offered guidance without trying to replace the mother Maddie had lost, understanding that her role was different, but no less important. As autumn deepened into winter, bringing the first snows and bone-deep cold that Calder had warned about, the family drew closer together. They spent long evenings by the fire, Calder teaching Jonah to play chess while Evelyn helped Lila with her letters. Maddie read aloud from books they'd ordered from the catalog, adventure stories that made them all gasp and laugh and argue about what would happen next. One particularly bitter night in December, with wind howling outside and snow piling against the windows,
Jonah looked up from the chessboard with a thoughtful expression. "Mr. Hayes," he said, then corrected himself. "Calder." They'd been working on that, getting Jonah to use Calder's first name to see himself as family rather than an obligation. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything, son."
Why did you do it? Really?
"When we showed up that first day, you could have sent us away. Could have told the sheriff to deal with us. But you didn't. Why?" Calder moved a chess piece, considering his answer carefully. "You remember what I said at the courthouse about how I'd been just surviving, not living after Sarah died?" "Yes, sir." "Well, when you all arrived, something in me woke up. I saw 3 people who needed help, who needed protecting, and suddenly I had a reason to be more than just a man going through the motions. I had a purpose." He looked at Jonah directly. "And you want to know something? Helping you helped me. Gave me back something I'd lost. So in a way, you saved me as much as I saved you." "I don't understand how we saved you." "You reminded me what it means to fight for something that matters, to stand up for what's right even when it's hard. Your Aunt Evelyn's courage, your determination to protect your sister, Lila's strength in surviving what she witnessed, all of it showed me that life is worth fighting for, that family is worth building, that love is worth the risk of loss." Calder moved another chess piece. Checkmate, by the way. Jonah looked down at the board, seeing the trap he'd walked into. He laughed, shaking his head. "You distracted me with the serious talk." "Strategy, son, strategy." From her seat by the fire, Evelyn watched them with a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the flames. This was what family looked like. Not perfect, not without scars, but real and whole, and worth every moment of fear that had led them here. Winter proved as brutal as Calder had promised. There were days when the temperature dropped so low that going outside felt dangerous, when the wind cut through every layer of clothing like knives. They lost 2 cattle to the cold, and one morning they woke to find the water pump frozen solid. But they endured, working together, keeping the animals alive and the house warm. Through it all, Evelyn discovered she was pregnant. She'd suspected for a few weeks before she was certain, recognizing the signs from watching her sister through 2 pregnancies. The morning sickness, the exhaustion, the subtle changes in her body. When she finally told Calder one evening in the privacy of their bedroom, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. "A baby?" His eyes went wide, his hand moving instinctively to her still flat stomach. "Our baby?" "Yes." Evelyn felt nervous despite his obvious joy. "I know we didn't discuss this, and with everything that's happened, the timing might not be—" "The timing is perfect." Calder pulled her close, his voice rough with emotion. "Evelyn, it's more than I ever thought I'd have again. Another child, a second chance at fatherhood." He pulled back to look at her face. "How are you feeling? Are you well? Do you need to see Dr. Mills?" "I'm fine. Tired, but fine. And yes, I'll see Dr. Mills when the road's clear in spring." She smiled at his concern. "Women have been having babies for thousands of years, Calder. I'll manage." "I know you will. You're the strongest person I've ever met." He kissed her forehead, then her cheeks, then her mouth. "Thank you. For this. For everything." They told the children the next day at breakfast. The reactions were varied and wonderful. "A baby!" Lila clapped her hands, her eyes shining. "Can I help take care of it? Can I hold it sometimes?" "Of course you can, sweetheart," Evelyn assured her. Jonah looked thoughtful. "Does this mean, will the baby be my brother or sister? Like, really?" "Really," Calder confirmed. "Just like you're really my son, even though I didn't father you. Family isn't just about blood, Jonah. It's about love and choice and commitment. This baby will be your sibling in every way that matters." Maddie was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she stood and hugged Evelyn tightly. "I'm going to be a big sister again," she said, wonder in her voice. "A real big sister, not just an only child anymore." "You've been a wonderful big sister to Jonah and Lila already," Evelyn pointed out. "I know, but this is different. This is—" Maddie struggled for words. "This is proof that life goes on, that new beginnings are possible, that we're not just surviving what happened, we're building something new." As winter reluctantly gave way to spring, the ranch came alive with new energy. The snow melted, revealing brown earth that would soon turn green. Calves were born, wobbly-legged and curious. Birds returned, filling the mornings with song. And Evelyn's pregnancy became visible, her growing belly a promise of life to come. She worked alongside Maddie, planting a vegetable garden behind the house, turning soil that was rich and dark after the winter's rest. Lila helped enthusiastically but inefficiently, more interested in finding worms than planting seeds. "Will the baby come before the tomatoes are ready?" Lila asked, holding up a particularly fat worm for inspection. "Yes, honey, the baby will be here in late summer. The tomatoes won't be ready until early fall." "What if the baby doesn't like tomatoes?" "Then we'll find something else the baby likes," Evelyn said, amused by the 6-year-old logic. "That's what families do. They figure out what everyone needs and try to provide it. Like how Calder figured out that Jonah needed to feel useful, so he made him his right hand?" Lila asked with surprising insight. Evelyn paused in her digging, looking at the little girl with new appreciation. "Exactly like that. You're very perceptive, Lila." Maddie says perceptive means noticing things other people miss. Maddie's right. They worked in companionable silence for a while, the sun warm on their backs, the smell of fresh earth rich in the air. This was healing, Evelyn thought. Not dramatic or sudden, but gradual and thorough. Every day the wounds left by Victor and Rebecca's death closed a little more. Every day they became a little more whole. By summer the changes were undeniable. Jonah had shot up 3 inches, his voice deepening, his shoulders broadening from constant physical work. He rode out with Calder most days, helping manage the expanded herd, learning to make decisions about the ranch's future. The hunted look had left his eyes, replaced by a quiet confidence. Lila talked non-stop now, as if making up for her months of silence. She chattered through breakfast, through chores, through dinner, her vocabulary expanding daily. The nightmares still came occasionally, but less frequently. She could speak about her mother now without breaking down, remembering the good times alongside the bad. Maddie had blossomed too, though in different ways. She'd turned 17 that spring, and boys from neighboring ranches had started paying serious attention. She handled their advances with a mixture of amusement and skepticism, but Evelyn noticed the way she looked at Thomas Grant, Sheriff Pierce's deputy, who'd been finding excuses to ride out to the Hayes Ranch with increasing frequency. "He likes you," Evelyn told her one afternoon as they watched Thomas ride away after delivering some official papers that probably could have waited. "I know." Maddie's tone was matter-of-fact, but color rose in her cheeks. "The question is whether I like him back. And do you? Maybe. He's kind, brave. He stood with us against Victor's men that day, didn't hesitate. And he makes me laugh." Maddie paused. "But I'm not ready to get married and leave the ranch. Not yet. There's too much happening here. The baby coming, Jonah still learning, Lila still healing. You all need me." "We do need you," Evelyn agreed. "But Maddie, we'll need you whether you're living here or on the next ranch over. Family doesn't stop being family just because geography changes." "I know, but still. I want to be here when my little brother or sister arrives. Want to help you through it, the way my mother wasn't here to help when I was growing up." Maddie's voice caught slightly. "She would have loved this, seeing the family grow, seeing my father happy again." "I think she's seeing it," Evelyn said softly. "And I think she's proud of the woman you're becoming." As summer deepened and Evelyn's due date approached, the household fell into a pattern of gentle preparation. They gathered baby clothes from neighboring families whose children had outgrown them. Calder built a cradle from smooth pine, working late into the evenings to get it perfect. Maddie sewed tiny blankets and gowns. Even Jonah contributed, carving a small wooden rattle that he presented shyly to Evelyn. "It's beautiful," she said, turning it over in her hands. "The baby will treasure it." "It's not much," Jonah said, embarrassed but pleased. "Just something to welcome them, to let them know they've got a family waiting." On a warm August evening, with the cicadas singing their summer song and the air heavy with the scent of wildflowers, Evelyn's labor began. Maddie rode immediately for Dr. Mills in Silver Bow, while Calder helped Evelyn to their bedroom, his face pale but determined to stay calm. "It's going to be fine,"
Evelyn told him, squeezing his hand through a contraction. Women do this every day. Not my women, Calder said fiercely. Not my wife. You're allowed to be special. Despite the pain, Evelyn laughed. I'll try to remember that. The labor was long but not complicated. Doctor.
Mills arrived in time, his calm competence a steadying presence. Maddie stayed to help, proving herself remarkably capable under pressure. Outside the bedroom, Jonah and Lila waited with the kind of anxious excitement that only children can manage, alternating between worry and anticipation. Just after dawn, as the sun was painting the Montana sky in shades of rose and gold, a baby's cry filled the house, strong and healthy and absolutely perfect. "It's a boy," Dr. Mills announced, wrapping the infant in a soft blanket before placing him in Evelyn's arms. "Congratulations." Evelyn looked down at her son, red-faced and squalling, his tiny fists waving indignantly at the world, and felt her heart expand in ways she hadn't known were possible. This was new life, untouched by the past pain, born into a family that would protect and cherish him. Calder stood beside the bed, his eyes wet with tears he made no effort to hide. "He's perfect," he whispered. "Absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" Evelyn asked. They'd discussed names but never settled on one, wanting to see the baby first. Now, looking at the child they'd created together, Evelyn knew what felt right. "Samuel," she said, "after your father. And Joseph as a middle name, after mine. Samuel Joseph Hayes." "Samuel," Calder repeated, testing it. Then he smiled. "Yes, that's perfect." They let the other children in one at a time. Lila approached with wide, awed eyes, reaching out a tentative finger to touch the baby's impossibly small hand. "He's so tiny," she breathed. "Was I ever that tiny?" "You were," Evelyn confirmed. "Hard to believe now, isn't it? Can I be his big sister, his real big sister?" "You are his real big sister, Lila. Nothing could be more real than that." Jonah hung back at first, uncertain of his place in this moment, but Calder called him over, gesturing for the boy to sit on the edge of the bed. "You want to hold him?" he asked. I don't know how. What if I drop him?" "You won't. Here." Calder showed him how to support the head, how to cradle the tiny body securely. "There, see? You're a natural." Jonah looked down at the baby in his arms, and something in his face shifted. The last traces of the hardened, suspicious child who'd arrived months ago vanished, replaced by simple wonder. "Hey there, Samuel," he said softly. "I'm your big brother, and I'm going to teach you everything I know. How to ride horses and fix fences and take care of cattle, how to be strong when things get hard, how to protect the people you love." His voice grew thick. "And I'm going to make sure nothing bad ever happens to you. I promise." Maddie was last, and she approached with tears already streaming down her face. She'd held herself together through the long night, been practical and helpful and strong. But now, looking at this new life, the baby brother she'd never expected to have, her emotions overwhelmed her. "He's beautiful," she managed. "He looks like Dad." "Same nose." "He's got your stubbornness, if his grip is any indication," Evelyn said with a tired smile, noting how tightly the baby was clutching Maddie's finger. "Good. He'll need it, growing up with all of us." Maddie leaned down, pressing a gentle kiss to Samuel's forehead. "Welcome to the family, little brother. We're a mess, but we're your mess. And we love you already." The first few weeks with the newborn were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Samuel proved to be a good baby, fussy when hungry, but generally content. The whole household rearranged itself around his schedule, everyone taking turns helping, sharing the load. Calder proved to be a devoted father, spending hours simply holding his son, talking to him in a low voice about the ranch, the weather, the family they'd built together. Watching him, Evelyn felt a deep satisfaction. This was what she'd hoped to give him, not just a child, but a second chance at the joy parenthood could bring. One evening in early September, with the heat finally breaking and autumn's first cool breezes arriving, they gathered on the porch as they often did. Samuel slept in Evelyn's arms while Calder sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders. Maddie and Lila were playing a clapping game, their laughter floating across the yard. Jonah was checking the horses one final time before bed, his movements confident and sure. You thinking about something? Calder asked, noting Evelyn's distant expression. Just remembering, she said, the day I arrived here, how terrified I was, how certain I was that disaster was following us and we'd never be safe. And now? Now I can't imagine being anywhere else. This ranch, this family, it's become more home to me than any place I've ever lived. She looked at him, her eyes bright with emotion. I came here expecting duty and obligation, but what I found was love, real love, in all its forms. I asked for one bride, Calder said, echoing the words he'd spoken months ago. And I got a whole family. Not exactly what I advertised for. Are you disappointed? Disappointed? Calder laughed softly. Evelyn, I'm the luckiest man in Montana Territory. Maybe the luckiest man anywhere. You gave me back my life. My daughter got her smile back. I gained 2 more children who needed a father. And now we have Samuel. He gestured at the scene before them. Maddie teaching Lila a complex clapping pattern. Jonah emerging from the barn and joining them. The 3 of them suddenly laughing at some joke. This right here, this is everything I never knew I needed. As if sensing the importance of the moment, Samuel stirred in Evelyn's arms, his tiny eyes opening to gaze up at her with that unfocused newborn stare. She smiled down at him, this child born not from desperation but from hope, not from obligation but from love. Your family is watching you, she whispered to him. Your father and your sister and your brother and your other sister. And we're all going to make sure you grow up safe and loved and strong. You're going to know what it means to be protected, to be cherished, to be part of something bigger than yourself. Maddie approached, her expression soft. Can I take him for a bit? I want to show Lila how to hold him properly. Evelyn passed the baby over carefully, watching as Maddie settled into a chair with Samuel cradled in her arms. Lila climbed up beside her, and together they cooed at the baby, their voices gentle and full of wonder. Jonah joined them, standing behind the chair, looking over Maddie's shoulder at his youngest brother. They're good with him, Calder observed. They are. Maddie, especially. She's going to make a wonderful mother someday. Not too soon, I hope. Calder's tone was dry. Though I suspect Thomas Grant might have opinions on that timeline. You've noticed that, have you? Hard to miss when a young man rides out here 3 times a week with increasingly flimsy excuses for why he needs to check on us. Calder shrugged. He's a good kid. Could do worse. Could do better too, though I can't think how. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children, because they were all their children now, not just by law or circumstance, but by love and choice. The setting sun painted everything in warm amber light, softening the rough edges of the buildings, making the valley look like something out of a dream. A year ago, Evelyn thought, she'd been living in Philadelphia, trapped by grief and fear, watching her sister suffer and feeling powerless to help. A year ago, she'd been answering an advertisement from a stranger, boarding a stagecoach with 2 terrified children, running toward an unknown future because any future was better than the present they were living. And now here she was, married to a good man, mother to 4 children who were healing and growing and learning to trust again. Safe in ways that went beyond simple physical safety, safe in heart and soul, knowing she was valued and loved and home. What are you thinking about? Calder asked. Choices, Evelyn said. How one choice can change everything. How getting on that stagecoach, coming here, trusting you, it led to all of this. And if you could go back knowing everything that would happen, the danger, the fear, the confrontation with Victor, I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Evelyn took his hand, lacing their fingers together. Every moment of terror was worth it to get here, to have this. As the last light faded from the sky and stars began to appear, they called the children inside for the night. The routine was practiced now, washing up, changing into night clothes, saying prayers or good nights depending on the child. Lila insisted on kissing Samuel before bed, whispering something to him that made Maddie smile. Jonah checked all those doors and windows, habits from harder times not entirely forgotten, but transformed into simple caution rather than fear. When everyone was finally settled and the house had grown quiet, Evelyn and Calder stood in the doorway of the nursery they'd created in a corner of their bedroom, watching Samuel sleep in the cradle Calder had built. He's going to grow up knowing only love, Calder said quietly. No violence, no fear, just family and safety and the chance to become whoever he wants to be. All of them will, Evelyn corrected. Jonah, Lila, Maddie, Samuel, they'll all have that chance now to heal, to grow, to build lives that aren't defined by trauma. Because of you. Because you were brave enough to run, to fight, to trust a stranger. Because of us, Evelyn corrected. Because you were brave enough to help when you could have turned us away. Because together we built something stronger than either of us could have built alone. They returned to bed, lying in the darkness with the sounds of their sleeping household around them. Through the open window came the night sounds of the ranch, horses shifting in the barn, the distant call of an owl, the whisper of wind through grass. Weeks turned to months again, and life continued its forward march. Samuel grew, his baby features developing into distinct personality traits. He had Calder's calm temperament and Evelyn's curious nature, constantly wanting to see everything, touch everything, understand everything. Jonah turned 12 and took on even more responsibility around the ranch. He could rope a steer as well as any adult cowhand now, could doctor a sick animal, could make decisions about herd management that Calder trusted completely. The thin, frightened boy who'd arrived with a knife and a wall around his heart had transformed into a confident young man who knew his worth and his place. Lila thrived in school, proving to have a quick mind and a gift for learning. She still sometimes woke from nightmares, still sometimes went quiet when memories surfaced. But those moments grew rarer. And when they happened, she had a family who understood, who held her through the fear, who reminded her she was safe. Maddie did eventually marry Thomas Grant, but not until she'd turned 18 and Samuel was walking and talking. The wedding was at the ranch, of course, with the whole community in attendance. She and Thomas built a house on the neighboring property, close enough to visit daily, far enough to build their own life. Within a year, she announced she was expecting her first child, and the cycle of life and love and family continued. On a warm evening in late summer, nearly 2 years after Evelyn had first arrived, the entire family gathered for supper, Calder and Evelyn, Jonah and Lila, Maddie and Thomas, with Samuel toddling between them all, getting into everything with the fearless enthusiasm of a 2-year-old. "More," Samuel demanded, banging his cup on the table. "Manners," Evelyn reminded him gently. "More, please." He flashed a grin that was pure mischief, and everyone laughed. "He's got you wrapped around his finger," Jonah observed to Calder. "He does, and I'm not ashamed to admit it." Calder reached over to ruffle Samuel's hair. "That's what youngest children do. They charm everyone into giving them whatever they want." "Is that what I did?" Lila asked innocently. "Still do," Maddie confirmed. "Don't think we haven't noticed." The conversation flowed easily, jumping from topic to topic. Plans for the fall harvest, Thomas's new position as full deputy, Jonah's hopes for next year's cattle drive, Lila's latest school achievements. It was the kind of ordinary, everyday talk that families have, made extraordinary by the journey they'd taken to get here. After dinner, as the adults lingered over coffee and the children played in the yard, Evelyn found herself watching them with a full heart. Samuel chasing after Lila, both of them laughing. Jonah showing Thomas a new technique for rope work. Maddie resting her hand on her growing belly, her face serene with happiness. "Penny for your thoughts," Calder said, settling beside her on the porch steps. "I'm thinking about that first day," Evelyn said. "When I stepped off that stagecoach with Jonah and Lila, terrified out of my mind, certain you'd send us away. And you just stood there in that brutal heat, looking at 3 strangers who'd brought nothing but trouble to your doorstep. And I chose to let you stay. You chose to save us. There's a difference." Evelyn leaned into him, comfortable with the contact in ways she'd never been with anyone else. "I've never asked you. Not really. Why did you do it? In that moment, when you could have said no, when any reasonable person would have said no, why did you say yes?" Calder was quiet for a moment, considering. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful, honest. "I looked at those kids, at Jonah trying so hard to be brave, at Lila not even able to speak because of what she'd witnessed. And I saw Maddie, saw what she'd been through when she lost her mother, how close I came to losing her too, to both of us drowning in grief." He paused. "And I looked at you, standing there exhausted and desperate but refusing to break. And I thought,
Here's someone fighting for what matters.
Here's someone who knows what it means to love so completely you'd risk everything to protect it. How could I turn that away? So you saved us? No. Calder turned to face her fully, his eyes serious. We saved each other. I was dying inside, Evelyn. Slowly, inch by inch, becoming nothing more than a shell going through motions. You gave me a reason to live again, to fight again, to be the man I wanted to be instead of the ghost I was becoming. Evelyn felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were good tears. Healing tears. I came here looking for escape, she said, but I found so much more. I found home. I found family. I found love in all its forms. Romantic love with you, maternal love with the children, the fierce bond of people who've survived hell together and come out stronger. She gestured at the scene before them. This, all of this. It's more than I ever dreamed possible. You know what the best part is? Calder asked, a smile playing at his lips. What? We're just getting started. Samuel's only 2. Maddie and Thomas are building their family. Jonah's got his whole life ahead of him, and Lila's just beginning to discover who she can be. He took Evelyn's hand. We've got years and years ahead of us, years of watching them grow and change, years of building this life we've started, years of proving every day that love and choice are stronger than blood and obligation. You make it sound like an adventure. It is an adventure. The best kind. The kind where you know, no matter what happens, you've got people beside you who won't let you fall. As the sun set over the Montana mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Samuel toddled over and climbed into Evelyn's lap with the confidence of a child who knows he's absolutely safe and completely loved. Mama, he said, patting her cheek with sticky hands. Mama happy? Yes, baby, Mama's very happy. Good. He settled against her chest, his eyes already drooping with exhaustion. Love you. Love you too, sweetheart. Within minutes, he was asleep, his breathing soft and steady. Calder moved closer, wrapping his arm around both of them, creating a cocoon of warmth and safety. This, Evelyn whispered, not wanting to wake the sleeping child. This is everything. This is family, Calder agreed. Not the one we were born into or the one we expected, but the one we chose. The one we built together from broken pieces and desperate hope and the kind of love that refuses to quit. As darkness fell and the stars emerged one by one, the Hayes family remained on the porch, unwilling to let the perfect moment end. Maddie and Thomas joined them, settling on the steps. Jonah carried Lila over, the little girl half asleep on his shoulder. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the night arrive, feeling the bond between them that was stronger than blood, deeper than obligation, more lasting than fear. In the distance, a coyote howled, not a threat anymore, just another voice in the Montana wilderness that had become their home. The sound used to frighten them, used to send Lila into panicked silence and Jonah's hand to his knife, but now they barely registered it, too secure in their safety to be troubled by shadows. Tell me the story again, Lila murmured sleepily, about how Mama came here. It had become their favorite bedtime story, the tale of how Evelyn had arrived on a stagecoach with 2 children, how Calder had chosen to help despite the danger, how they'd fought Victor and won. Each telling emphasized different details, but the core message remained the same. Love conquers fear, family protects its own, and courage can transform everything. One more time, Evelyn said, beginning the familiar narration. Once upon a time, there was a mail-order bride who brought 2 children to a ranch in Montana. As she spoke, Calder held her close, Samuel slept in her arms, and the children listened with rapt attention to a story they already knew by heart. Because it wasn't just a story. It was their story, their history, their proof that broken people could heal, that desperate choices could lead to beautiful outcomes, that families could be built from the rubble of tragedy. The mail-order bride had come seeking one thing and found everything. The rancher had asked for one bride and gained a complete family. The children had arrived traumatized and terrified and found safety beyond measure. And together they'd created something precious and rare, a home built not on blood or obligation, but on choice and courage and love that refused to surrender. As the last words of the story faded into the night, Evelyn looked around at her family, every face precious, every soul cherished, and knew with absolute certainty that every moment of fear, every mile of running, every second of terror had been worth it to arrive here. In the warmth of a Montana summer night, surrounded by the people she loved and the life they'd built together, Evelyn finally understood what she'd been searching for all along. Not escape, not safety, not even survival. Home. And she was finally, completely, eternally home.